Hello and welcome to episode 247 of the Crate and Crowbar. It is the 16th of July 2018. My name is Chris Thurston and tonight I'm joined by Tom Francis. Hello. Alex Wiltshire.
Hello.
And Tom Senior.
Hello.
And this is a very special week because this week, 5 years ago, some of us, some people departed now, gathered in a graveyard for the first time to record the first episode of this podcast. So yeah, this is the 5th birthday of
Who was there?
the Crate and Crowbar. I believe the first episode was me, Marsh, Graham and Tom F.
Yeah.
But not Tom S. I think your first one was the second one, Tom.
Yeah, I think I came in like an episode or two later.
I think it was an episode later. I don't think it was.
Only so many people could fit into that graveyard, in fairness. It was.
Yeah, it was tiny.
Was it I Deserve Infinite Dragons?
I Deserve Infinite Dragons was the title of that episode. And we didn't receive Infinite Dragons. We got limited goblins. And to celebrate the birthday of the pod, those of us who are drinking this evening are drinking delicious gin, which was sent to us as a birthday present by listener Orbital. I think I'm pronouncing it right. There's some hyphen and underscore business going on in that name.
It's on a lovely bottle.
It's a beautiful bottle and even better gin.
44 botanicals?
That's 22 botanicals.
22, oh shit, I oversold it. 44 can't be done. Gin industry has been trying for years.
But they have been foraged.
There's kind of embossed text in the bottle, which it looks like it could be lore.
I think it lists them all. I think I see...
Oh, we see, it's all the botanicals.
I think one of them just says cats.
Just some dead
delicious
cats. Yeah,
cats.
It goes into, I read that as Imperious, but it's junipers. That makes sense because it's gin. Yeah, what else is in there?
Communism,
menthol,
Timus,
Artemis.
I think it's communis, so it's probably a part of a Latin name for something.
I see, yeah. Bucus, that sounds good.
I think it's basically, it looks like it's all just names of Destiny characters.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's actually just a reserve naming list. Like if you ever run pen and paper campaign, you have a side list just in case a player ever asks what somebody's called. Here you go. It's just the Latin words for plants, water and gin, probably. Anyway, thank you very, very much for this kind gift and happy birthday us, I suppose.
Happy birthday.
Hey. I thought it would be fun to return to, basically the show notes for episode 1 to discuss the news, then. So the news 5 years ago, was that Gunpoint, had recouped its development cost in 64 seconds.
No comment.
I'm glad to hear it.
No comment there from developer Tom Francis.
No, I sort of regret writing that post. I planned it a long time ahead because the budget was $30. So I knew no matter how badly this bombs, I'll be able to say it made its cost back really fast. And then it did really, really well. And I still did the post. And so I think the post came off as kind of smug. So I kind of regret it now.
Otherwise, in that episode, we discussed Civilization 5.
Five, really?
A whole new civilization ago.
I think it was out by then.
Right.
I think it was.
Oh no, it must have been. Yeah, it was been 8 out.
It was better than what was to come.
The Bulmer Peak.
Oh,
that's where you drink when you're coding. It's the peak level of alcohol.
Like competency.
Peak level of coding ability as your alcohol level increases. Past the Bulmer Peak, you start to get too drunk to code. Below the Bulmer Peak, you're too sober to code.
This is riffing on an XKCD comic about this precise thing. We discussed Peter Molyneux's invention of the dog. Wasn't current then, isn't current now, because that's how time works. We discussed Mask, and we discussed this because Graham was present.
That's MASQ, the adventure game. There is, I believe, another game from that person.
I feel like with Mask, the promise of Mask has kind of been delivered on by various dodgy David Cage games in the years to come.
Yeah.
It's pretty much just that format, and with a massive budget put behind it. Obviously, some not the best plots ever to be put, onto screen. But I quite enjoyed it. This is not a PC game, but I quite enjoyed Detroit Being Human, Becoming Human, whatever it's called.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. I had a really good time with it, even though it does repurpose huge elements of the civil rights movement in ways that don't show the greatest amount of respect for the weight of that. But stuff reappropriates things dumb ways all the time, but they could still be fun and interesting. And I played it as a pad passing game on the couch with my girlfriend, had a really good time with it, just making decisions quickly. And I've become I feel like I've been too snobby about complex inputs, and a lot of people criticise David Cage's games for being too simplistic, and they are obviously to an extent just kind of quick time events. But if I like the idea of there being a genre where it's so devoted to storytelling, and you can sit there and play it alongside someone and enjoy it as a kind of more interactive TV box set, and for that to be a type of game that sits alongside immersive sims and all the other types of game I love. So I quite enjoyed that.
I enjoyed, also wasn't obviously a PC game, but, oh Lord, the one with the murders and the army. David Cage.
Oh.
Fahrenheit.
No, after Fahrenheit.
Heavy Rain.
Heavy Rain. Yeah, I thought it committed all kinds of kind of crimes, narrative, and kind of just all kinds of crimes. Kind of women objectifying terrible things and all sorts of things. But I did enjoy it. And that little bit of interaction definitely pulls you in. It does. Like, it's as facile as those movements are and how twitchy they can be. I felt engaged by them. Like, I was pulled into the story. I thought actually it had one really creative bit, which was a sequence where you're looking after your son, and it's in the evening, and the son has to do his homework, and you've got to make dinner. Can't remember all the things you need to do, but you have like in real time, you have a number of things you've got to do in order to be a good dad, basically, and everything's a faff because things are in the real world, and you've got to perform as much of this as you can. Hurry the kid along, get food done, get him to bed and things. And I thought that was a really nice use of what had established already, and it worked in the story because, the big theme in the game is being a dad, and like that was the one actually, in my opinion, objectively good bit, but it's a pity that they didn't all build on that. Does Detroit have anything like that in it?
I think all of those games have like a shining scene or two that just where the tension, the pacing of it is so good, and it can really obviously not when you're like doing the washing up and stuff. But there's a very very good scene at the start of Detroit where you're playing as Connor, who's an android investigator who's been drafted into a unit that doesn't trust him. Like, it's a David Cage game, you're going to get pretty broad strokes kind of procedural cop stuff most of the time, but you investigate the kind of scene of the crime, and they've put in like a almost Batman Arkham style detective sequences where you're kind of envisioning what might have happened in this scene. And then you go out onto the balcony and they've got a hostage and you have to talk them down. But it's incredibly tense, just having to make decisions under pressure in a kind of social context. And particularly in a very, I'm going to say mundane context. And what I mean by that is that it's just in someone's kitchen, or it's just in someone's backyard in a world that is futuristic, but nonetheless recognizably a contemporary world.
Yeah.
And that still holds a huge amount of novelty for me. The idea that, a drama scene can happen in a kitchen in a game. It's still so unusual because games feel like they have to push into just extraordinary new worlds, and they're very good at doing that. But sometimes when you bring that drama back into someone's bedroom or into a suburban house, that is actually worth celebrating in games. It's something I'd like to see more, even if the game doesn't treat a lot of those scenes very well.
That studio is actually really good at mundane spaces.
Yeah.
Like, their kitchens do feel like kitchens, and they kind of, like in a way that a lot of games, like the proportions are all wrong, or, they're just like...
This is a raid dungeon sized kitchen.
Yeah.
I deserve infinite kitchens.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
I think, I wonder about this because, I haven't really enjoyed any David Cage games because I think he's I think the games have pretty appalling stories, like, when it comes down to it. It's this thing of, a lot of games have appalling stories, so it's not unique to them, but it's like the closer you get to cinema and the further away you get from games, the more that quality bar needs to raise. Like, I don't know if it's I feel like sometimes it might be that these, as soon as games show a little bit of ambition narratively, they get cut down all the faster because the bar they're setting for themselves is higher, and therefore, you would forgive it if it was in a shooter or an RPG or something, but you wouldn't forgive it in a game that is an interactive quick time event. And when games do it well, like Life is Strange, it really does come off. But it's almost like it's, something about David Cage's games have the air of like, there's a sort of type of filmmaker who's got like bigger ideas and they're really like emotionally sensitive enough to execute. And, but I appreciate that, like, I've been in the outlier in this sort of regard before, because I really hated Until Dawn, which people seem to love.
Oh, you didn't like that?
Me and Marsh played it together on the sofa.
Oh, okay.
Basically loathed it because it was so pointless and manipulative that it, like, your choices really didn't matter, and it was just this roller coaster. It reminded me of like the did you ever watch Saturday morning kids TV in the 90s when like kids would call in to shout at Hugo, the man who would run left and right when they shouted, and if they got all the way to the end of the track, Hugo didn't get hit by a minecart, then you'd win a prize.
Just Twitch plays Hugo.
Pretty much. Well, that was, you know, it was like live and kicking plays, you know, a proto Twitch, basically. That's what these games remind me of sometimes, where it's just like the illusion of participation in a bad cartoon.
Yeah, the illusion part is really interesting because I'm kind of happy to be fooled sometimes. And what Detroit does very well is that it builds on what Telltale games have done more and more recently, where when you get to the end of a scene, it shows you the entire web of potential outcomes for that scene from moment to moment in a way that is definitely, you know, in terms of real choices that are actually being made within that web, it obscures that from you. You don't really know whether the hidden scenes here would be identical or, you know, trivially different to the one.
It just means that there's another node.
Yeah, right.
You don't know what's going in
but
the node.
It's still quite effective. You see the percentages that everyone's chosen and gone down through these paths, and it gives you this sense that, oh,
but that's a
this
cheat.
is my, I know,
It's a
but
cheat.
it doesn't matter, Alex. Like, this is, you know, you go into stuff like Sid Meier talking about falsifying the way that games show you statistics in order to make you feel better. Like, it's all about, isn't it about the outcome rather than the actual truth of the systems sometimes, especially in a narrative game where it's trying to trick you into, you know, being that character or taking some ownership of that character specifically.
But that is the terrible thing with like most interactive dramas, where most of the time you're thinking, was that part of it? Like, did I make a choice there that had an effect on things? Like, in what way is this responding to what I'm doing? Like, you're constantly like outside of the actual story, like in so much of this stuff.
I think it can be irritating because it sort of makes you complicit in what happens in a way that a film doesn't, but without being fair about that at all.
No, yeah.
It's like if you're watching a film or reading a book, then you know that you are not responsible for the action. You know what I mean? This is the power dynamic there is really, really clear. Whereas when a sort of, particularly when it comes down to like a moral dilemma or something in one of these games, like I think about this in terms of who survives and who doesn't in Until Dawn, which is really down to an arbitrary series of things that you
I honestly enjoyed all that because it's like it had the frisson of just watching the horror film where it's arbitrary and that's like part of the fun.
See, like, for me, that's exactly why it breaks it. Because in the horror movie, you understand the tropes, but you're not responsible for the execution of them, so you can be surprised by it. As soon as you introduce the slightest kind of like quotient of agency, or the impression of agency, the notion that the choices I make might have any effect, which you need to feel it a little bit. It can't be totally like, I'm just putting bushings and I'll see what happens afterwards. Like, as soon as it's clear that it doesn't really matter, it's like, well, you've given me some control over which tropes I want to see kind of executed, but you're doing them anyway, and therefore this has become a fight rather than something I've just bought into. Like, you've given me the ability to pretend to fight the narrative, which a film doesn't. You don't even worry about it.
Yeah.
And therefore the whole thing becomes frustrating rather than fun for me. Like
that element of so can I do a spoiler for the end of Heavy Rain? Which is
sure we can.
This is the thing that made me really angry with that game, where you play I think you played 3 different characters, maybe 4 or something, but I think it's 3 throughout the game. And one of them is this ex-cop, or maybe he's still a cop. I think he's an ex-cop or like a detective now, like a private detective. He wears a coat. He's kind of in his late middle age. And he's helping your characters and you're playing as him, and you investigate various crime scenes relating to this serial killer this person who has abducted a child. And you're this character, like you're meant to be making decisions as him. Like that is fundamentally what you're meant to be doing in these games. You are role playing.
Yeah.
Right? At the end of the game, it is revealed that he is the killer. Which means that all the times you've played him, you haven't known something which is utterly, like, vital to his character and would be informing every single one of the decisions that you've been faced with. And it's like, You cannot do that. You cannot you cannot do that. That's a crime.
Like the thought when you first play it, and he's like, whoa, I'm the killer.
They don't know.
See what I mean? It's like at that point, the whole thing becomes pantomime, right? You might as well, you are yelling, he's behind you at somebody who is, fully aware, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if there was someone else directing those games and with the same kind of technical teams and art teams and people executing every other element, you might end up with some maybe classics in that genre. And the first scene of Fahrenheit is extraordinary, and Fahrenheit is one of the fucking stupidest games I've ever played. And in video games, where all the stupidest plots live, and this one with easily outstrips almost everything else I've seen. But the first scene is about somebody wakes up with amnesia in a toilet, and there's a dead body there, and you're obviously implicated in their murder, and so you panicked. You cover them up, and then the scene switches over to you as the cop who has to then investigate that scene, and it manages to balance the drama of those two scenes while hiding enough from you, the player, to make both of them work. And the game is brilliant for about 20 minutes before it goes completely off the rails. And
they put all of their effort into it. Oh, I'm exhausted. That was so hard.
And then people hallucinating insects, angels flying around after you in churches. It all comes after that point. And Fahrenheit, or Indigo Prophecy, I think it's called in America, is worth playing for a laugh, especially as a kind of couch padding game.
That was the game that made me discover a dark secret about PC gaming in general, which is it had button mashing events, as well as sort of quick time events. There was ones where you just had to hit the same key as hard, as rapidly as possible, and I would just fail these events every time. And I'm not even just leaving my hands in the normal position. I'm sort of putting my hands so I can hit the same key with both fingers, alternatingly, and just focusing my entire body on doing this. I cannot pass it at all. And I found out later that if you press keys on certain PC keyboards too fast, it just registers as one press. And so, past a certain threshold, pressing it faster makes you fail those events instead of making you better at them. So you have to press it slower to pass those.
Oh my god.
That's a ruse worthy of David Cage himself.
Yep.
I think for me, it's these stories can really work, and I think Life is Strange is an example of a game that works really well. And the first season of The Walking Dead use a lot of these same ideas, do it really well. But for me, it's they have to build a story and have a kind of ambition in terms of what the story's going to be about that kind of matches what they're technically capable of. And I think Life is Strange does this. The problem I have with, I think, every David Cage game now is that, it's almost it's Peter Molyneux inventing the dog. Maybe this is why it came up in that original context. It's this idea that we've got some of the technology, therefore I can create the greatest piece of art there's ever been, because that's the only explanation for what
But
Fahrenheit.
That's the bad thing. I don't think it's technology. They've all looked very good for their time, and now the faces in Detroit are good, aren't they?
Extraordinary.
It's all of my problems with them are structural and kind of tone and script and kind of narrative design decisions.
And that's what I'm saying. It's the type of story they want to tell with it is beyond the capacity to execute on a level beyond tech. I guess that's maybe I explained that badly. It's just because you have the tech doesn't mean you also have the ability to transfer that into meaningful cinematic or literary storytelling.
Yeah.
Whereas setting your stall in a very specific place, and figuring out that first and then building technology seems like the better way round. That's why, 80 Days is going to tell 15 more compelling stories than are in any of these games.
Yeah, that's true.
Because the technology's ultimately got nothing to do with it. Yeah.
Poop.
Do not like the robot game, but I appreciate that. Yeah, but I guess couch kind of co-op is the perfect.
That definitely
venue
helps
for it.
It helps a lot because it diffuses a lot of the stupidity of what's happening, or actually becomes part of the fun. And we did finish the game with the sense that, this is, again, you're sort of controlling three characters in different strands. And this was at Marcus and this was at Connor. And we did have that sense. The game had tricked us into feeling that we had some ownership of those characters, which is more than any other David Cage game has done, frankly, because they tend to go off the rails so quickly. The problem with Detroit is that it kind of wades into issues and things that it just, domestic abuse, where they just doesn't show the requisite sensitivity or understanding of the subject matter to actually say anything interesting, and ends up coming off as exploitative rather than, and it's difficult here because like a lot of people say we want games to tackle more serious subject matters and to actually start telling stories about the real world. But, a lot of the time we get stories that are bad about the real world.
Yeah.
And it ends up reflecting badly on the medium.
I mean, at the same time, I think if some blockbuster Hollywood film waded into it, it would do no better or worse job tonally, I think.
Yeah.
But they're just a bit wiser. They don't.
Yeah, look, plus films still are bad at this all the time. It's just because there's different sensitivity in games because it's something that they're trying to do that they're not very good at, or historically games haven't been terribly good at telling literary stories. So when people try and wade into that.
And sometimes agency can introduce problems that are unique to games when it comes to handling sensitive stuff, right? Like if you let, it's, word depends what you let the player do, but yeah. Or it means that you have to curtail the player's agency because the subject matter is important in a much bigger way, therefore at this point you can't, etc. Yeah. So that was Mask. I'm trying to think if there's anything else stands out from that episode 1. We talked about Deus Ex Human Revolution and Dota 2, but we probably said enough words on those two things to last. Those are two of the big Ds, so to speak. Star Wars Galaxies came up, God knows how. The Cat and the Coup, which is interesting. What happened?
Cat and the Coup.
That's a free game on Steam where you play as the cat of... You're playing as somebody's cat and you learn about them and their lives, and I think they're sort of... Possibly. It's, it's like a political history thing.
Eastern field.
I think it's Iran. And also, completely opposite end of the spectrum, iCycle, which is a flash game where you're a little naked man on a bike. And I'm getting this from show notes for episode 1 just to see what we remember.
Yeah.
Did you not believe that game existed?
No, I did, because the creator of it, I just met at Develop for the first time since I met him at Develop 5 years ago when I saw that game and talked about it, I guess.
Wow.
Nice symmetry.
Yeah.
Ice.
To meet you.
To meet you to ice?
Again.
Oh no, it's too warm in here already. We should do what we've been playing in the year 2018, however, I think, before we lose ourselves entirely in trying to remember 2013. A dead Gambit. Tom, what have you been up to?
I finished Mooncrash, which I pray Mooncrash is the DLC that turns it into a sort of roguelike.
How many hours?
25.
Oh, that's shorter than I
really
thought.
Shorter.
Oh, I mean, it's long, don't get me wrong, but it's...
Yeah, it's pretty substantial for a chunk of a hub, basically. A hub with sort of 4 attached areas, which is kind of a structure that Prey's main campaign has a bunch of those, right? There's sort of several hubs with different areas attached to it, and this ends up being not so much like a roguelike in the way, like, roguelikes are designed to play forever, even after you complete it, you still will go back and play it again and again. And in case of Spelunky, there's all these, arcane secrets to discover, but even once you discover all those, you still go and play it again to, see what you get on the next run. This doesn't have that feel to it. It's got a list of about, I think it's 50 different things to do, and after you've done them, you've just completed the game, basically, and it very much doesn't feel like there's any reason to go back to it. But what it is, I think, is a very efficient way to use that amount of space. I've got to believe this took them about as long as making one of those hubs for Prey, plus some time for the structure stuff and testing and things. But like my run through of Prey itself was about 35 hours, which was long for a game like that. But I bet it took them an insane amount of work to make that much content for me to go through. Like I was just spending all that time consuming new stuff for that entire 35 hours. And I bet it took them a lot less than, 80% of that development time to make Mooncrash, which lasted me 25 hours. So there's 5 characters, and we talked about the structure before, but it has to be explained every time we talk about Mooncrash because there's no easy reference point for it. Each time you play, you're starting a simulation run, and each character you play as, you'll either die or you'll manage to escape the moon base. And either way, you can then play as any of the other characters. And once all the characters have either escaped or died, then you've got to reset the simulation. But also the simulation's getting harder all the time. There's just a sort of time-based difficulty scale that keeps going up. If that hits the maximum, it just ends your simulation forcibly, which is kind of annoying. And also it might just get so hard that it makes more sense to reset the whole simulation rather than carry on. And you've got many, many different objectives, and that's one of the things that works about it, is that there's just loads to think about, and on each run, you'll get something done. You're constantly getting loads of points for everything you do, and you can spend those points on upgrades. Every character has a story objective, which is what you have to do to unlock their story mission. And so it's like, for this one, you've got to escape through the portal, and then that'll unlock this character's story objective. So after you've escaped through the portal, on your next run, they now have a memory marker somewhere that when you go to that, it will flash back to something in their past, and then you'll have a special objective based on that. And all 5 characters have a different one. And then there's the overall goal of like trying to get all 5 to escape in the same run, so none of them die in one run of the simulation, which it all feels very challenging at first. And then there's these the escalating difficulty basically makes each run kind of go to shit. Like you're trying to get things done, and then by your third character, you're at difficulty 4 or 5, and all the enemies are super tough and killing you in one hit. But then there's these delay objects, which is like, we mentioned them last time. They're just like, the description is literally, this is an abstract object representing the concept of delaying the difficulty timer a bit.
It's called it's like delay.time in brackets or something, isn't it?
And you can fabricate those within the run. There's recyclers and fabricators as there is in Prey, and you can just make those out of a certain amount of materials. And I was actually getting pretty annoyed with I had a run that just ended because I hit the hard time limit. I wasn't dying to the enemies. When you hit difficulty 5, it just ends the game for you.
Oh, really? There's a hard time limit?
Yeah. Huh. Which just kind of annoyed me. I had a load of neuromods in my inventory, which is like the level up points. And those, if you spend them, are permanent. They upgrade the characters forever. So they're great. And I'm very wary of losing them. If the character might die, I put them in the stash so that the other characters can get at them. And I had no idea the game could just end. And it just ended with 8 of those unspent. So I just lost those forever. That sucked. But yeah, you can make the delay things. The delay things, if you have enough of them, you could just keep it on difficulty 1 forever. And difficulty 1 is kind of trivial. And only when it goes up a difficulty do enemies respawn. So even when you lose a character or they escape, when you play as a new character, if the difficulty hasn't ticked up to the next level, all the places you cleared out are still cleared out. And so I just did a run with the engineer who has they can upgrade their inventory, they can upgrade their recycling efficiency. And I just went around hoovering up all the stuff, just picking up all the junk. Then I went to a recycler, turned it all into mush, then used the mush to fabricate. I ended up with 18 of those delay time things. Nice. And then used them all. I was using them as I was making them, I was kind of hoovering up as I went around, completed the engineer's story mission, which had unlocked by that point, on her run. And then with everyone else, they were able to just follow in her footsteps. She was able to pass on all the spare delay time things to them. They actually manufactured some of their own on the way, because by then I knew exactly what to harvest to make them. And the whole thing was just trivially easy, and I got all 5 of them out, no problem. I think I still had 15 of them spare at the end. And
so I think they there was a patch last week, I think, which increased the price.
Yeah, it makes them a bit more expensive to fabricate, but it still doesn't stop you doing that. And I just think that's a bad difficulty system, because it was harsh to me as a newcomer. I felt intimidated by the game and oh god, I just can't get anywhere in this because I'm being beaten up by this time and pressure. I'm not allowed to snoop around and take my time like I do in an immersive sim. I have to fight this horrible thing. But it also doesn't serve the purpose of making it challenging for experienced players, because once you learn the trick, you just exploit it, and now it doesn't, you don't have to do it.
It's work as well.
I think that almost just comes down to those items being craftable. If they weren't craftable, you could scale the timing differently.
Yeah. I still wish it didn't outright stop the simulation at the end of it. If I'm surviving okay at difficulty 5, then just let me. That's kind of interesting in itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's full of so many interesting things. The plot stuff is actually really good, and I especially love just having 5 completely different characters with their own personalities, their own histories, They have their own skill trees, so they're mostly things that you could, like the main character in Prey could have all of these things, but in Mooncrash, each character only has a small subset of those. So the engineer is the only one who can ever repair things, and the only one who can ever expand her inventory space.
Does that make her the best one to start a run with?
Yeah, if you want to craft that, if you want to do that crafting thing, basically. Yeah, that's why I did it that way round. But then there's other objectives that, where you want, after I did that run, I thought that was like, I'm glad I got all 5 characters out. I'm glad that's checked off. But that was boring. I don't want to do it again. I was doing well enough by that point. All I had left to do was the story objectives. So for everyone else, I would just start a run, play as them, do their story objective, and then at the end of it, I was planning to just reset the whole simulation and then play as someone else. As it happened, one of them completely fucks that up because it forces the difficulty counter to 5, just as part of the story thing. And so the rest of your run is just scotched, like you can't really do anything, unless you're prepared for that. It's also really bugged. It just completely broke my game twice. This is the Volunteers story mission. And it's a really nice idea, but it had a sort of gameplay scripting problem that forced me into a situation where I just it was a forced failure. And then when I played as the next character, I just was falling out of the map and then died immediately. And then on the post death screen, it just said, no reason given for death. Thanks. And then when I finally had to restart the whole run, did it all again. And the Volunteers story mission is, like I said, it's a nice idea, but it's just an idea. And then you just walk from point A to point B and it just ends. There's nothing to it. And the Directors is also like that. You just have to pick up some objects and put them in some slots and then it's over. Whereas some of the others are really involved and really interesting. There's a really cool interplay going on between the security officer and the operative.
Yes, the janitor.
That sounds like, that sounds about right.
There's, both their story objectives relate to each other and, there's lots of, interesting kind of secrets to discover there. And I found myself in the end of the security officer's objective. He has a kind of moral choice to make, and it played out very differently to me than it would have in Prey itself, because in a long immersive sim where you're just one character, there's like everything you do has to be the way you're going to do it. It has to be like how I would do it or what I think is the right way to do it. And in this way, you're playing 5 different characters in shorter runs, and each run is kind of disposable. When I was asked to make this decision of like whether to kill someone or let them go, I was thinking, initially thought in my kind of normal, game playing mode, like what would I do? And I think, well, I'd probably let them go. But then I thought, but I'm playing the security officer. Really, this is his whole job is to stop this person. And, I just don't think he would. I think he'd just kill them. And, so I killed them because I thought that's what my character would do, which is something I don't normally do in like, if it's going to be a 35-hour game and this is hour 3, making a decision like that early on is kind of too scary. It's like, oh god, what are the consequences? Am I going to be punished for this? Or
yeah, I think it's an interesting one. Like, it's a bit weird that even though the characters do sort of like show up for each other through story missions, also the fact that you unlock the security officer by finding the security officer's body, which is kind of there to teach you to use the security terminals to find people, which you have to do in a few different contexts because people can be moved to different parts of the station on different regenerations of the simulation. It was weird to me that, like, having found his body, I could then immediately play as him and go to the place where I found the body, if that makes sense. Like, some of the characters feel like they shouldn't be available until after, like, a refresh of the simulation where the circumstances have changed a bit. And to the extent that they interact with each other in the story missions, it might make more sense if those actually had. Because some of those decisions would be interesting if you had to live with their consequences in other people's runs. Yeah. If that makes sense. Rather than it being a very abstract thing.
Yeah, it is really weird. The story missions, it's impressive they managed to make them work at all because the concept doesn't really make sense. Which is, you get to this memory marker, you have a flashback to kind of where you were and what you were doing when it all went to shit. And then you just carry on playing from there. But it's also the same persistent world you're in that has the effects of your previous runs and stuff like that. And so it's this weird mishmash of, is it a memory or is it happening now?
Yeah, it's like, I'm back on the day job, but here's the moon shark.
Yeah. And it almost feels like those should have been siloed off into their own little thing. Like you do the mission, you do the story objective in the normal simulation, and then that unlocks this mission that you just click a button to play elsewhere and it just happens.
Yeah.
Like, it's its own custom version of the simulation that tells you what this person really happened. But that process of like figuring out the past, it also almost had the feel of like something like Lost or like a good TV show concept where a moment brings this unlikely cast together, and then through flashbacks you pick apart like who they all were and what they're all doing on this fateful day, you know. This day when it all went to shit on the moon base, all of these 5 people were doing something different and had their own like problems and issues going on. Figuring it out was really cool. Yeah, it's a really weird mixed thing. There's a lot of glitches and bugs and confusing objectives and strange decisions with the timer and stuff.
I found that, as time went on, you sort of hit, like, it's such a good high concept, and it's such a good structure, and it has lots of things that are good about it, but I find myself noticing, I think because of the time pressure, it's like, I don't think either you or I, Tom, play immersive sims like a speedrunner does. And I think something about the time pressure forces you to learn how to play these games like a speedrunner might. Not fully like glitching through walls to appear in different places, but like, not really like sinking into the atmosphere of it necessarily. Like, when you're in the main outside area of the moon, you have the moon shark, which will come and get you if you step on the ground. So the floor is moon shark is kind of the sort of theme, and you got a jetpack from rock to rock as you go. And then if the moon shark is like too close to one of the gates that detects Typhon, then the door won't open. But this can lead to some sort of weird moments of like sort of like chain hopping up a ledge to make sure you're not touching the ground until the moon shark goes away, so that you can sort of like just get through the gate and things, rather than invest the time in finding a Typhon lure to pull it away to a different place or anything like that. It's not really worth it. You might as well just sort of hop about or try and get up the geometry.
It's not clear what that range is either. Like, it's a very vague thing. So I wouldn't be confident I could throw a Typhon lure far enough that when the Typhon was there, it wouldn't trigger the thing. Also, if you put enough Typhon mods into yourself, then you block those gates. And at first I was really like, oh my god, I've just broken the game. Like, I can't get anywhere now.
And you can't unmod yourself either.
No, it's completely permanent. So then I bitched about it on Twitter, which I thought might help, and it did. Because I found out you can take those barriers down with the EMP grenades or even just the disruptor gun. Just shoot them.
Of course it does.
Of course you can. Yeah, it's always the thing. Like, I think this is the interesting Prey arc for me. Is like, you've just said that, and I just realized all these janky things I've been doing weren't necessary. And it's like, I think I'm
wrong. At fault here.
Yeah. It's like,
it's interesting that didn't occur to any of us. Like, we all knew the disruptor gun disables electronic things. We all knew it was electronic, but there's something about it that doesn't feel like it
feels like a gameplay thing. It feels like a game.
Yeah, I think it's the fact that the janky thing also works. It's like, you've given me a slower, stupider solution that involves hopping up and down on a rock until the moonshot goes away. Therefore, I haven't gone into my inventory to figure it out with what I've got. Right? And that's not entirely the game's fault, because you're right, like, I should maybe be more creative as a player, but it's the fact that, like, because of the simulation, it is deep enough to allow weird shit to work sometimes, or for just, running through environments to work sometimes.
But it's because some of the things are so rigid. Like, when you're in one of the story missions, for instance, like, you have to go and, you have to use sort of very specific systems in order to succeed at them. You have to go to the security thing to find out where the body, and I don't know. You often sort of feel like you don't know where the division is between what you can and can't do and where the game is defining that.
There's actually a transcribe that mentions this, but it's the very last transcribe I've found in the game. I think it might not even be like one you find lying around, but part of a story mission. And it's somebody talking about like experiments to raise phantoms, and somebody says, "Oh, what if they got loose?" And it says, "No, it's fine. We've got containment with the with all those gates." And she says, "Wouldn't a voltaic phantom just take those out?" And he says, "Oh yeah, we can't let one of those get out. It'd be a disaster."
Man, it is good though. It's just, I think it's one of those things where like, it's not the shine wears off entirely, but like I found that like after my first failed simulation, my second one was like magic. Like, I found so many of the time things, I couldn't even make them at this point in the first one, that like I did 2 of the story missions and unlocked all the characters with and that was having just set up everything with the volunteer. Like, set up all of the escape routes. Like, did all of the things basically, then got myself out using the hardest escape route so that everybody else and then reset the timer back to 0 because I had so many of the hourglass things that then I could sort of like give everybody else a way out.
Yeah, that was kind of how it worked with my engineer. She just cleared the way for everyone, and because the difficulty hadn't ticked up, nothing had respawned, so everyone was able to just waltz to the, like,
Yeah.
I'm going to the skateboard, I'm going to the shuttle, I'm going to here.
I'm getting the big gun, bye.
Oh, everyone except the director, I guess.
Right, yeah.
Whose method is less pleasant.
It's a good bit of, with that in mind, it is still good kind of grim horror, sci-fi.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good, horrible moon shit.
Yeah, I'm really glad they made
working title.
I'm really glad they made it, because it's a genuine, like, experiment in structure and form and stuff. You know, something that no one's done before that I've seen. And, it'd be very interesting to see an immersive sim that was like this. Obviously, you know, there are some problems with the structure, but, I'd like to see almost like an episodic immersive sim, because the shorter run and having multiple characters gave me so much more freedom to kind of just be who that character felt like they should be. And when I'm making decisions about neuromods, I'm not committing for the next 35 hours. I'm just saying like, I think this character probably wants to be stealthy, so let's pump a load of mods into stealth.
Like, what if there was like 30 different characters in the final game? Like, you know, why not? Like,
Yeah. If it was just like, if Mooncrash was over and then you go on to like Mooncrash episode 2 and it's, you know, Mars Crash or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's a new cast of characters and a bunch of other stuff. I wonder what that'd be like if a full game was like 3 of those or something.
Yeah. I think maybe the starting again would get, I don't know if this is a good length or something. If you know what I mean, like it's sort of fun to kind of pick this apart and do it once, but if you sort of finished an environment fully and then had to do it a new one, you might...
Back to the, you know, being led through the first kind of establishing rule set stuff. And,
If they did one on Mars, it could just be Doom Crash. Good.
Yep.
Alex, what have you been up to?
I've been playing something very different called Yoku's Island Express. Have you come across that?
No.
It's a genre mashup by a Swedish studio called Villa Gorilla, and it mashes together the pinball game with the platformer kind of adventure game, which kind of, you know, if you imagine an open platforming world where, you know, you can freely roam from one side of the enormous map to the other, except for you're a dung beetle pushing a ball, and like it has lots of pinball-y things, so like little flippers and things that will skip you up to upper levels, and sort of interspersed within the levels are actual pinball tables, or at least effectively pinball tables, which act as like, I suppose you call them dungeons, really. Like the way that the adventure game aspect of it works, like there's like a town and there's all sorts of things going on, and you're going through a story. You are a delivery dung beetle for some reason, and you're delivering letters, and you have to unlock areas so you can get to them and deliver your stuff and that kind of thing. So you have to often enter into one of these pinball tables and sort of go through them, and they're quite dynamic, like in a way that a normal pinball table is very kind of rectangular, upwards, squared off thing. These pinball tables are organic, and they kind of wander off in different directions, so they're always surprising to play. You don't know the extent of them when you start, and then you notice there's another flipper further up, so you're going to go, oh, now we're going over there, and then it's sort of really kind of unfurls itself really nicely.
Can you fall all the way back to the bottom?
No, well, it's cleverly done so that, like, so basically, sort of, I'm actually writing about it for my mechanic column for Rock Paper Shotgun, but like their first kind of run version of the game was what you'd expect it to be, which would be, let's make an open world where everything you do is just pinball. So like but of course that does invite the problem of like what happens when you fall all the way back down again?
Fall back to the start of a 20-hour story campaign.
So actually it feels a lot more like, I mean, you get to walk left and right at any time. obviously when you're on a pinball table, you're just never going to do that because you're rolling much, much faster than you'd ever walk. But, sort of, the pinballs tables are organized in such a way that the loops that you go on are quite tight. And there's very little penalty for failing. So when you lose a ball, there are these kind of like, thorns there, and they take away some of the things you're collecting. Fruit, which is like this currency that you're collecting. It just takes a bit of that. So basically there's very little penalty other than you just got to maneuver the ball back up to where you were. But anything you've unlocked on the way is gone. But there are loads of little mechanics like to give you those little pinball-y sort of flashes of, oh, I do this and then I do that and then that unlocks that thing and then that happens. There are lots of little things like that. So, there are these kind of, I think they fly things or like these sort of blocking, things. And if you go near one and then you press a button, then you soak it up and then it becomes explosive and you can blow your way through walls. And that provides those kind of, multi-direction, multi kind of action sort of these sequences you have to do in regular pinball tables. But like, it works surprisingly well, like bringing together such a sort of a genre which is entirely, abstract. Like the pinball sort of logic is just, it's a weird form of maths and kind of, go up this lane and then you go to that lane and you hit these buttons and, but it translates that into game logic, logic in terms of kind of, not in terms of so much narrative, but in set terms of a setting that you can understand, which is consistent across different tables and things. It's really nice. And it's all on this beautiful kind of tropical island and it's got nice kind of fun music and it's just really relaxing and nice. It's just,
How does it hold up against Sonic the Hedgehog's many forays into being a pinball?
I think it's quite a lot better than them.
Fair enough.
But it's the control thing. You feel much more in control. Like the Sonic thing was always kind of skirting on the edge. We're going really fast and you're really quite frustrated at the same time. This one is, it's more puzzly, more involving, more kind of, it's just delightful really. It took them 5 years to make it.
Wow. Jesus.
Which I think is kind of one of those.
Started it when the Crate and Crowbar started.
Yeah. It's like a nice, neat thing. Yeah. And, it's by people who worked on Riddick.
Wow.
Really? What the hell
Starbreeze.
Wow.
So one of the lead designers on The Darkness and Butcher Bay and the art director
those games are like horrendously violent. Yeah. This is 5-year holiday.
It's so good.
Shanking people in prison.
Does the beetle just look like, does it have Vin Diesel's face?
I like to think so.
Because I like to think that he'd like a break from shanking people in the dark as well.
I want to go on holiday pushing a dog
Be a
ball.
Fun beetle.
Can you unlock a multi-beetle mode if you hit the right power-ups in the right order?
Oh, mate. There should be.
Vin Diesel's Island Express.
And then weirdly, so like the game in between that, so they also did a game that's on kind of most of the Nintendo platforms called Colors, which is not a game. It's a coloring, like an art sort of app program thing. So, from shanking to art to dung beetle pinball.
Lovely. Oh, that's Yoku's Island Express.
Yoku's Island Express, and it's got the logo looks like Yoshi's Island writing, so it just instantly puts me in the right mood.
That's a good zone to put yourself in. It's a good through line in video games of like tropical island set novelty platformers.
Yeah, and it's the best place to be. It's where you want to go.
Better than Butcher Bay.
And the moon.
Tom, where have you been? Oh. Sorry. That was an amazing timing.
I've been playing, I need to get this right. I always play the games with the most complicated names at the moment. This is Warhammer 40,000, Gladius, Relics of War.
Gladius.
And this is,
that sounds awful.
This is a 4X strategy game set in the Warhammer 40,000 universe on the planet Gladius. And it is, you've got 4 playable factions, you've got base building, you've got hexes, tasty, delicious hexes.
So we've gone back to Civilization 5.
Civilization 5. Or it feels closer to Endless Legend, particularly with the kind of UI it's adopted. It's very beautiful, clear UI. A lot of it is quite slick and easy to use. It's kind of, you sort of glide through it and it feels pleasant enough to click and turn to watch the things move around. But it's a 4X game that is purely based around combat, and that is an experiment.
That's only one of the X. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only one X.
Only one X matters. In fact, it's like, you have to explore before you exterminate, so that's 2 X's. You have to find the enemy before
expand is one of them, right? So
yeah,
and I suppose
it's like killing people.
you kind of do all of them, but it feels like a few X's are missing. That is like, that is quite insightful. That is how the game kind of feels, because it's so combat focused, and it made me realise how much you kind of need diplomacy and ridiculously overcomplicated research webs.
Oh, so it means that when you've got a neighbouring kind of sort of race or whatever, they're going to attack you. There was no kind of
there's no question of what's going to happen. And it also makes it all about hex combat. And I think that there have been good hex combat games, and there have been pretty dedicated war games. And it reminded me a little bit of Rights of War, which was an old 40k quite hardcore hex based, but it was about missions. You didn't have a base, you just had to complete missions in certain scenarios. But it was a very complicated combat game that was based loosely on like Panzer Generals 2 and stuff like that, like old proper World War II hex based war games. Whereas this has very much gone at that from a different angle. It's gone at it from the angle of Civilization 5 and Endless Legend. And the base building is like really trivial because you only have one object, and that is to make war machines. And it's like, it's very fitting with the setting, but as a game, it's like really
what
deeply
shall
rewarding.
I build next?
Yeah. And so you're short of requisitions. Oh, what shall I do? Oh, just build the requisition building on an empty slot you've got. Oh, okay, I've done that. Okay, 3 turns later. Yeah, you've got enough requisition now. Oh, what else am I short of? Oh, power. Oh, what do you want to do there? Oh, you've got as many slots as you want in the city, so what do you want to do? Oh, I'll just build a power building. Oh, how can I tell? It's got a little lightning bolt on it. And all the progression of the game is simply about just doing what the game's kind of asking you to do, and it feels completely arbitrary. And it's a strategy game that robs you of so much of your agency because the moves you make are so obvious in every aspect of the game apart from combat itself. So of course you're going to pick these particular research options. Research is just like every research tree is basically you get a selection of 5 or 6 things, and once you pick 2 of them you go up to the next selection of 5 or 6 things. So it's really simplistic, just kind of picking and choosing stuff as you go up a ladder without any real kind of, it doesn't really matter whether you choose to specialize in one thing or another, because all you ultimately have to do is build 20 things. And because units can only occupy 1 hex at a time, if you build enough things, you just win the game by just be able to span the entire map with an army.
Fill the map with your army.
Yeah. This is it just reveals huge problems with the sort of the hex combat system, especially because it's the entire focus of the game. So if I just build loads and loads of basic tactical marine squads, and they've got like 5 elite squads, they can only shoot at one of those tactical squads each turn. There are no AoE effect things. So you simply win by having numbers in the system because you just like walk past them or walk around them. And, nothing is very lethal in the game. Everything whittles everything down. And there are sort of relationships between weapons. You might have like las cannons that have more armor penetration, might take vehicles down a little bit faster, but not that much faster. And a lot of the damage is semi-randomized anyway. So, a las cannon might have a very good turn against infantry, a load of infantry might have a good turn against the tank. Like everything in the kind of mulch of dice rolls that happens in a big conflict just ends up being meaningless. So you just end up with this production game where you just throw out units and they clash with other units, and there's no challenge and there's no strategic thought going into or tactical thought going into where those units are specially positioned, because you just build more and keep throwing them at the enemy until they go. And the AI, like as far as I played it, never put a constructed force together and attacked me. They're just sort of there to be mopped up. And the game tries to, the only reason the game kind of wouldn't be over within a couple of hours is because they put loads and loads of wildlife around you that you have to kill first in order to actually get to the enemy.
Give you something to
which
do.
Are basically roadblocks, that you have to just get past in order, and you kill some, there are horrible kind of gribbly scorpion type creatures, and you have to kill those lairs if you want to, I suppose, to stop them from endlessly spawning, and then you can push on to the Necrons. The Necrons, who are supposed to be like a, eternal world, universe destroying force potentially that lives in every world, and it could come up and just obliterate everyone, like that, basically the undead faction of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. But I got to them and they had like 5 units left and I just sort of rolled over them. And then I lined up loads of Space Marines around their kind of central base, the central building in their base. And it took about like 10 turns of incrementally chipping that down as they did nothing to stop me because they just didn't have any resources. And then that blew up and it's like, oh, the Necrons are vanquished now. That's great. The Necron, it's not a good strategy game by any stretch of the imagination. But it's kind of interesting, like, by taking a load of the busy work out, and it kind of lays bare how bad 4X combat is in almost every game. Like, it always comes down to, even in the best strategy games, it comes down to like dice rolls. It's like how, like with Galciv 2, like something you've played loads of.
Yeah.
So it's kind of about, you know, do you have the resources to put the most dice rolls on your big ship that you can roll into the enemy? And, you know, that's kind of like a meta resource victory rather than a kind of tactical victory that you've really accomplished. And this is just the ultimate stripped down version of that, where you do the basic resource gathering and then the rest sort of follows. And it's a little bit depressing.
The best thing about Galciv's combat was that, or Galciv 2's combat was that, all your ships were potentially designed by you. You know, there were templates, but you could just custom build every single one. And so it was up to you to kind of look at what the enemy were actually fielding and see what kind of armor it had, whether it was ablative armor or shields or, and then figure out what weapons are good for that. And then sort of custom build a ship that's like really heavy on the attack that's going to get through that kind of defense, and then just build shitloads of engines to it and give it no armor just so it can get there and take out like this one important ship of theirs. And the actual fight was just automated. It would just like happen. It would win because you designed the thing to do exactly that. But it felt good because it was like, yeah, I built that specifically to do that one thing, and it'd be terrible at anything else. And next time we have a different situation, I've got to design a whole new kind of ship. But
yeah, that's a good point actually, because in this game, you can unlock certain upgrades that change units and might give them extra guns and stuff. But a massive part of the Warhammer 40,000 setting and the war game itself is about equipping your units in certain ways to make them powerful against certain things or others. So the classic thing is that a Space Marine Devastator squad, which is basically a heavy weapons squad, you can give them like las cannons, which blow up tanks, or you give them like heavy machine guns, which will destroy infantry. And you build them in this game, and they just come with las cannons. And as a 40k fan, you think, oh, good, I can just use them to take out the tanks. And then they just sort of don't. Over a period of many turns, they'll just do like 3 or 4, they'll just do chip damage against a tank. They'll do slightly more damage than a tactical marine squad with basic machine guns, but they won't really do anything else. There's something fundamentally broken about the sort of rock, paper, scissors environment that they've created that means that everything you build is kind of the same. which is sad.
They also set themselves up for a problem in that a tech tree by its nature is kind of heresy. You shouldn't be allowed to go up it. You should only be allowed to go down it. Like,
that'd be very 40k, wouldn't it?
There's actually, I think there's sort of mileage in like 40k Galciv, but where one of the problems that you'd have as the Imperium is that like you start with all of the tech you'll ever have, and all you can do is like prioritize what you try and hold on to.
You start with like loads of alien tech you've stolen over the last millennia or so, but if you start using them, then it increases your risk of the Inquisition turning up and just nuking. Just destroying your entire chapter.
Yeah, like you can attempt to like discreetly search like a tech upgrade, like improved irrigation, and then it's exterminatus.
Everything must die now.
Yeah, man. There's something there. It'd probably be just incredibly sad. But your very high production of increasingly useless things. Yeah,
it's a shame because again, I just still want good 40k games because it is a good setting for video games. It's like a very video game setting in many ways. Like it's so over the top. The factions are so vivid. The stakes are so ludicrous that you could just craft a good RTS campaign out of people blowing up planets and tyrannies coming out of the warp and stuff like that.
Isn't it?
Yeah, and the Dawn of War is great. But you see the licenses going out to almost anyone, and you see a lot of these kind of middling games coming out that aren't great. And the
screenshots I've seen of the maps, I mean, obviously they're meant to be grim, but like it's all very purple, brown, kind of. It all looks a bit dismal.
Yeah, it is. It's because it's all set on Gladius, just one planet. You only get like pretty much.
Is Gladius a nice place?
It's not a nice place.
Could they set it on a nice place?
They kind of could. There are like lush jungles and stuff. 40k, like
Yeah, I remember some in Dawn of War.
Yeah, all the planets can just be beautiful if you want them to be. Then they get destroyed and made horrible by the factions that run in. But Gladius itself, like they are randomly generated environments, but they're all the biomes are pretty basic. You do have sort of polar areas that are a bit snowy, but mostly it's just purple and brown. The units are kind of, at a glance, look like the tabletop versions, because Games Workshop wouldn't let them get away with them not looking accurate. But in motion, they're just like, they're very stiff and uninspiring. And if this was like Warhammer 40,000 Battle Chess, which is a game that exists, but basically thrives on having ridiculous animations and stuff. If it was just a very basic, game about producing units and pushing them at the enemy, and you didn't have to think very much, but there are all these kind of crazy animations, it's really exciting. And
like the hollow chess from Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And I would forgive it much more of its simplicity if it generated any of that.
But what you're seeing is like a collection of 3 Space Marines kind of go dugga dugga dugga, and then you're watching pew 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 of the thing, and there's no 3 pops up.
Yeah. So Civilization has ruined this for everyone, because Civilization has like bespoke animations depending on what's fighting what. So the spearmen fighting other people with swords and shields, like their spears will go into them and they'll fall over. Like
that's how that works.
Yeah, but that's not how that works in this game. And because the attacking unit does the attack animation and the defending unit reacts not at all to it. There's like grenade attacks that you can do, and they literally look like they're throwing pebbles, and they just barely explode when they hit, and the unit receiving the attack just literally stands there completely motionless. And then, as Alex describes, a little 3 pops up, and then their health bar goes down slightly.
How many turns, generally, how many turns does it take to kind of take down a unit?
So if it's one unit fighting another unit, that you're looking at I would guess 7 to 10 turns.
Jesus Christ, that
at
is...
a basic level.
Does it tell you how much time passes per turn?
It's 4 millennia.
Yeah, it's like a year.
You're building cities and stuff, so it's quite a while.
Yeah. My granddad's been out there. His granddad before him fighting that one Space Marine.
This is actually a problem Sins of a Solar Empire had. The combat took an incredibly long time, and colonizing new worlds kind of didn't. You could while the fight was going on, you could just go off and colonize a new system and come back with new reinforcements from there before the first ship has died.
Yeah, if you've got a basic unit fighting a slightly higher level animal, not even just an enemy unit,
just a very patient leopard.
Yeah,
a weird scorpion.
If they're not leveled up, they won't necessarily receive enough damage to die for a long time, but they can spend 7 to 10 turns chipping them down. You shouldn't do that, obviously. That's a stupid move to do in the game. You want to go and get them to kill lower level stuff, and the game kind of wants you to gang up on situations like that and send 2 or 3 units to surround, and then you can burst stuff down in 2 or 3 turns. But
still 2 or 3 with hundreds of guns.
I just love the implication, it is your birthday, my child, and today you come of age, and she'll go fight the patient leopard like your father and mother before you, and their father and mother before them. We've been fighting the patient leopard for a long time.
There's a fundamental scale problem with only having 1 unit to a hex. When
it's just one guy standing 15 hectares throwing pebbles at
15 years.
15 years.
So a city can be a very advanced city will be a central hex and maybe 2 surrounding layers. And you can build an army, a very basic army that is much larger than that city. And they're not allowed to go occupy each other's hexes. They have to stretch out across these vast areas, which is a problem with hex combat generally. If you're going to have units in a hex, they have to be really impactful, because you can just block out entire sections of the map, which is what you end up doing with this game. It's quite instructive for what not to do in a strategy game.
It does sound fascinating for that.
Yeah, it definitely. Yeah.
Does it cause pathfinding issues too when you're moving large armies around?
It's not too bad. The UI is pretty good, and the pathfinding is generally quite good. And it's just stuff like if you hold down the right mouse button when you're actually guiding a unit, it'll show you the path they're going to take. And if the path gets blocked, it'll basically stop and ask you to. Pick a different path for them.
Yeah.
It never really caused many problems.
That was my thing with Civ 5, was just all of my units were stopping every single turn to say, I don't know how to get to where you told me to get to because there's a guy in my way, and it's the other guy. And the other guy's also saying, I don't know how to get to where I'm going because there's this guy. It's once there was more than 5 units, that was happening just every single turn. Everyone would need me to tell them manually, okay, just go to this step in front of you is empty, isn't it? Why don't you go there? And just wait to see if eventually there's another hex you can get to.
The first map that it generated for me in this game, gave me only one route to the southern hemisphere half of the map, which is where obviously all the enemies were based. So all of my Space Marines had to, before I unlocked like a drop pod ability that let me actually drop onto their base eventually.
How did you get there in the first place?
There was one hex.
We were all born here.
There was one hex at the very top right of the map, which is like a massive choke point, and everything had to go via that hex.
Right.
To get all the way down.
80 years of just queuing up to go through the hex.
Yeah, so it was very much like, you, every time a new unit came out, you just like left click on it, scoot down to the very bottom of this massive hex map, just right click on a random hex and be like, fucking see you in 50 turns, maybe. And that whole game's planned out that way. It's like dreadnoughts going one by one through this like massive choke
You
point.
own spaceships, presumably.
They do. You do eventually get tech that lets them drop in, but it takes influence, and to get influence you need to build influence buildings. Yeah,
Just YouTubers.
It's not a good game. It's not very good. It's not very
That's
good.
a shame.
It is a shame.
Yeah, it's a shame because it's like top of the Steam charts at the moment. It's done really well.
Yeah, it has done. Well, it seems
relative,
to be relatively
quite
popular. And, to contrast that, we played another Warhammer game over the weekend called Vermintide 2, which is
wonderful.
A fantastic game.
Yeah.
It's really, really,
Very
really good. And they've tweaked a lot of kind of upgrade systems. I saw that there's problems with the progression and stuff in it, but the actual, the levels are really cool, and the classes are really cool, and the actual, the melee combat is excellent as well. It's really good stuff.
Playing that through with the same 4 people, so we had one consistent party, and making sure that we did it all together so no one had seen anything for the first time.
Nice.
Getting all the way through the campaign was like genuinely one of the best multiplayer things I've done this year.
Yeah, the levels are really, really cool.
Good little adventure, and there's so many good moments in it. Like, although it can be buggy, but sometimes it's the best.
Yeah.
Best bug I've ever seen in that game was when we all died except I think my friend Dan, who was trapped in the animation where one of the kind of random sort of big monsters, Left 4 Dead tank equivalent that can show up as a chaos spawn, which is like a sort of tentacle beast, which shows up, and one of its things it'll do is like pick you up and then like bite your head. Not off, but like a lot, and then throw you.
Yeah.
And he got stuck in animation where he did all of that, but then it didn't throw him. So it was just holding him. And the rest of us were all like, one of us was like dangling off a ledge in that kind of like Left 4 Dead dangling, waiting to be revived way. And everyone else is sort of just like lying on the ground. And everyone is screaming. Because everyone's screaming their I'm down barks. And the game should have ended because we should all be dead.
We've all been incapacitated.
Yeah, and, but like, it was just this chorus of, and this Chaos one got stuck in this animation where it was just standing there waving one guy around and just wobbling its tentacles and kind of like bellowing in the air. And he would go, "Oh no!" every couple of seconds. And then someone else would go, "Help!" And then it literally just, we had to quit the game, and it was really a real shame, but it was one of those.
Fantastic.
I shadow played the whole thing. It was one of the, honest to God, we were weeping with laughter. Like, it was just, the whole thing is so like, and this is how the world ends.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The barks and stuff, the Witch Hunter are brilliant. And we fought a troll for the first time on Sunday, and it's the best execution of like a Warhammer troll, which has like, famously has a vomit attack. Yeah. But this vomit attack is disgusting. It's so gross. The kind of particle effect, the omni spray that kind of comes out of it as it flails at you is so gross. It's excellent. It's a very, very good game. They've done a great job.
You get the, they've done really well to like expand all those original characters out into like subclasses and things. I don't know if you got far enough to get to the...
Not quite, but right. I know, yeah.
Because I started off as I played the dwarf all the way through, and I really loved the dwarf because you go from like, dwarf ranger who's a bit good at everything but can run around, and then I played the iron breaker for a long time, who's basically just like, it reminded me of our D&D campaign, like the brick child, basically. Like, it's like, like a 3-foot wedge that you just put in front of, and because the dwarf is so short but can tank so much in front of them, anyone else can stand behind them, like waist high cover, like mobile shooter game cover. And then immediately after that you unlock the Slayer, which is basically the opposite. You take all of your clothes off and get 2 axes, and then one of your abilities is just like propel dwarf. It's like you go from 0 to like bounding 20 foot forwards, and it's like impossible not to do, because it's legitimately a bad idea quite a lot of the time, but that's kind of the point of the fantasy of that. And so you get into the situation where like you're facing down hordes of chaos warriors towards the end of the game, in the really rad environments, and in the sort of like some strategy, and then you just can't not press the boing button because you just like, run you off. It's so good.
All the art that exists of Slayers shows them in midair. Points over their head. Like, that is completely the fantasy.
Permanently aerial dwarf. There's, oh man, I want to play Vermintide 2 again.
Yeah, I want to play that game as well.
Brilliant game.
We shall
play it.
Yeah, and the fact that like, when you get in the high difficulty levels, like friendly fire is always on. So it becomes, and that
really?
actually makes it really interesting.
Yeah.
It's like the fire wizard, like the bright wizard.
Yeah,
It's like,
they are really dangerous
really
as it
dangerous.
is.
And like, but even like the dwarf can get too excited and like people start dying or like, a bad, it's a game that welcomes calamity, which is something I really, really love about it.
Yeah, nice.
Which, we'll roll new characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't played either of them.
Maybe we should put it on the old...
You can skip
on the
Vermintide
pod.
1 now, I think. Like, I went back and played Vermintide 1. Like, it's the same characters, like, it's one story, but you can skip ahead, and the second one's just, like, a lot. It's like, like, the only thing it doesn't do is the thing that Left 4 Dead 2 did, which is, like, include all the levels from Left 4 Dead 1. Like, if they did that, it would be perfect.
That'd be really good.
But I think they made so many structural changes and added loads of new enemies. And, I mean, the whole chaos stuff, like, the first one's 100% Skaven, hence Vermintide. And this one's a mix of Skaven and chaos and
It's some of the
Gribblies.
most fun melee combat I've had. First person melee combat that I've experienced in the game, I think.
Yeah.
It's got a brilliant interpretation of headshots and a real sense that you're chopping bits off people and stuff.
It's a really good piece that someone wrote about how that works.
Hey. There's I love that like little soft balancing things, but they're really funny. Like Chaos Warriors are really, really tough and big. And they take, you really want to take them down with like precision headshots. But it's really hard to do when you're a dwarf.
Right.
Because you're so small that you can't get up there, which leads you to these experiences of like running up a ledge and jumping off. And when you do get that kill, it feels amazing. Like, basically it's like, it's just Helm's Deep, the game, basically.
Right.
It is just, the Legolas and Gimli rivalry turned into a
And where it makes more sense as well. Like we are superheroes because we're Warhammer heroes.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Man, damn. We don't play Vermintide now.
That's great. I love it.
What do you play, Chris?
I have been playing Objects in Space, which is a lovely indie, space exploration game. So shades of Elite.
Which X is this one called?
It's exploration.
Exploration.
Exfoliation. I was trying to,
How many X's? Just one.
Just the one X. You can explore. You can exploit, maybe. I don't know. It's not that kind of game. It's sort of, I guess, mechanically quite a lot like Elite in that it's a spaceship sort of trading exploration game set in a star system. But what makes it, it's an interesting proposition from a presentation point of view. The developers describe it as modem punk. So it's sort of like late 80s, early 90s computer tech. So not quite the same era of tech as in films like Alien or whatever, where, you have 70s computer tech, but like not miles off either, a little bit further along. But like your spaceship is basically a series of 286s, that are wired up to different systems. And your interaction with the game is you sort of use the arrow keys to move left and right through rooms, really, like in a sort of old school, like point and click adventure kind of way.
Flick
Perspective, basically. Yeah. Rather than moving around yourself. And then when you dock in a space station, you can move around the space stations in the same way. You can click on terminals to bring up the terminals, interact with them directly. And everything is very sort of, analog and there's a lot to sort of learn about how the systems work. And the high concept is that you sort of learn through a little tutorial, then you get dumped in this, space sector and left to your own devices really, really, really quickly. And so you can do more or less anything you want. And the appeal comes through the kind of depth of simulation. Like the developers kind of describe it as a bit like a submarine game. And it kind of is because that's
the first thing I thought of, like those old DOS submarine games where you'd be flicking between, like, now going to the port.
Yeah, actually, that's the best comparison. Like Silent Hunter, kind of.
Silent Hunter, exactly.
Your ship, you might be able to just about see a tiny bit of pixel. It's very sort of voxely and kind of, lo-fi, but, nice looking in its own way. Like, and, you might see a little window of space, but it's sort of realistic in the sense that when you do see space, it's just going to be a spinning starfield because your ship is spinning for gravity. So tonally, in terms of the plot and things, probably think The Expanse is kind of like where it's at, like sort of lo-fi, heavily industrial, everything's a little bit shit. People are just doing jobs to get along kind of space fantasy. And, it takes, the systems are pretty deep in terms of how things are simulated. So moving around in space is a question of looking at your nav console, which is just a little icon representing your ship on a star field and everything in scanner range. And then you can plot a course and let your autopilot do things, but maybe your autopilot will take you into an area you haven't explored before. You'll find yourself an asteroid field, and you'll hear, it's a lot is done with sound. It kind of reminds me of, well, lots of games do clever things with sound, but like, you know how like DEF CON gave you the sense that you were in a nuclear bunker just with atmospheric sound, even though you're just looking at a monitor, basically? It's that same thing, right? Like, it is smoke and mirrors to the extent that it's not new Elite where you'll be looking out the window at incredible stellar vistas. And not even really old school Elite where it'll attempt to simulate it using the graphics available at the time. It's very much you're staring at a screen. And you'll plot.
Did you ever play Capsule? It's an Adam Saltzman and some, I think, a sound designer. I can't remember the name, but that is you're looking at a scanner screen.
I think it's Robin Arnott, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. You're just looking at a scanner screen, and it is all about sound. And like the things you can see on the scanner screen are basically ASCII, and all you're doing is sort of steering your ship and picking up enough O2 kind of icons that you don't run out, sort of thing.
Your breath and your pulse, right?
But it's all kind of like if you hit something, you hear it clonking against the hull. But you're just playing a Spectrum game. Like effectively, that's as deep as it goes.
This is similar, like not like in that, obviously it is using travel time on the map to give you a sense of the scale of space, even though it's very much illusory, right? You can't look out the window and see stars and spaceships going by. You're just glued to your screen watching the monitor. Occasionally you'll maybe take manual control, and it's very much like, quote unquote realistic space flight in that, momentum is conserved. And so your autopilot and your RCS will sort of take control of all these things for you if you want them to, but they might just take you through an asteroid field. Maybe you'll stop and move around. Then all of this stuff sort of feeds into deeper systems, like, if you plot a course so that your turns take place in nebula, then that will mask some of your engine signatures, which will mean the pirates will be less likely to find you, because everything is sort of simulated at a very granular level about how ships detect one another and that kind of thing. And you can buy and upgrade every component in your ship. If a component in your ship breaks, it's not just a question of repairing it. You have to disconnect it, open it, unscrew 4 screws, take the panel off, look at the circuit board, and then figure out what components need replacing. And next time you're in the ship, buy the right set of capacitors and plug them back in, or manually and put the screws back in. That kind of thing. It's super detailed. And there's lots of I've only played 3 hours of it now, and I'm pootling because I think it's a game of pootling. But there's lots of stuff to sort of pick up on, like when something appears on your long range scanners and you don't really know what it is. It could be another ship, it could be a cargo container, it could be debris, whatever. Initially your main way of, you might think, I'll upgrade my scanners and that will resolve a better signature faster. But one thing you can do is look at the scanner, which is just another computer in your it feels like you're on a wheelie chair, spinning between banks of computers, basically. You're glued to the nav most of the time, but then you might look at something else and find that okay, well, if I look at the scanner, when I select that object, it has a waveform. And that waveform displays, like any other waveform would, peaks and troughs at different frequencies. And different types of equipment, from engines to reactors to so-and-so, as well as having a power drain, have a certain frequency that they resonate at different wavelengths. So if you look at something and you really know your ships, the idea is that you'll be able to tell, oh shit, that's a Series 3 class freighter masking its engine signature because I can see the waveform matches. So there's all this and there's even an NPC that charges you 100 credits to teach you how that works. And that's the sort of level of granularity that if you want to be a pirate, then you can find ships that are masking their signatures in a nebula by looking at the waveforms and figuring out that's debris because it's only resonating on this frequency that indicates it's made of nickel or something. But this is a ship because that looks like an engine frequency.
The Nickelback frequency.
The nickel card. This is how you remind them. But no, and that's just really neat. But on top of that is quite a sort of nicely put together, not story necessarily, because there is a story, and it's I don't want to spoil what happens at the beginning, necessarily, to kind of put you into this sector of space. But, as you start to explore, as you go to certain stations, you'll meet NPCs, and again, you just tab through different screens on the stations, and there are terminals to interact with and buy new parts and ships and take contracts and take on passengers and upgrade and take loans out and stuff like that. As you do all that stuff, you also notice meet NPCs that kind of give you quests, basically. And you have some choice about how you choose to go about executing those quests and what you prioritize and what you don't. And that's all good. And it puts those things in front of you in quite an organic feeling way, which is really nice. And the other thing is that time passes kind of not in real time, but like in-game time passes as you do stuff. And it only pauses when you pause and everything else. You can accelerate time to move faster between things, but it is keeping track of the date. And as you go, the news advances. So when you check you bring up your communications terminal, this is the level of granularity where your communications terminal is linked to like a synchronizer, which is like a line with stellar relays, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, you have to manually sync it. So you might wait, and that has a power.
So you don't know what date it is until you've synced it.
You'll know what date it is because it's on your PDA, but you won't know if you got any new messages until you I've just got a jump drive in my ship now, which means I don't need to go through gates, like jump gates to travel between systems. I can spool up my jump drive and jump manually, which is this whole process that feels very not like Star Wars hyperdrive exciting. It's not like dashing and then...
Has it got the Eve thing of align? Like, is it that sort of technical process of aligning?
Yeah, you've got to spool up the jump drive. And so everything has... So the nice thing is there's no fuel. I think fuel would have killed the game because it would feel very, pedantic, constantly refueling. You have to worry about damage and things, but that's something you've usually incurred due to something you did wrong. Like, you went through an asteroid belt because you weren't looking at where you're plotting a course, that kind of thing. But your reactor and batteries and solar sail, if you have one, can only generate so much power for you. But it will always generate that amount of power. And then different actions will drain power. So if you have a healthy ship, well, you're just, because flying somewhere is not a case of flying with the engines on. You boost for a time until you get to your maximum velocity and then you stop. And then your autopilot will take care of this most of the time, including turning you around halfway and then boosting the other direction to slow you down. And that's where, if you want to mask your signature, you want to time it so that whenever your engines are on, you're somewhere where you're not in range, or you're in a nebula where it'll mask that signature and that kind of thing. So that's where the strategy comes in, which is all kind of neat and clever. But your, stuff will have, you can see at any given time when you learn there's a lot of learning what bars mean on stuff and what buttons do that you can just click, on the panels that are in front of you and things. But you learn to let your power spool back up so that when you're operating on sort of like your RCS, your kind of flight control stuff, you're not tanking your reactor. Like, it's had a chance to kind of get some power into the batteries, but then it'll tick over nicely. And then jumping between systems using your jump drive is a case of coming to a full stop in the right quadrant of the sector you're in, spooling down everything, then spinning up the jump drive and it'll click up to 100%, and then building up a jump solution for the target system. And you can jump early if you want, but it's better to let it tick up to 100%. And then you jump and everything goes dark for a second, and then all of the terminals reboot, and you watch the DOS windows come up on all of them and go through all their little, because everything reboots when you jump to a new terminal. And then maybe swing in your chair. I think sometimes it's portrayed as walking from room to room, but for me it feels like being that bored captain in Alien, where you're just sort of sat in the chair looking at the terminals, just sort of waiting for something to go wrong. It's good with sound cues as well for when you need to pay attention to something.
I'm definitely a sucker for kind of screens in ships. That was the thing in Scavenger
SV4. Yeah, it reminds me of Scavenger SV4. Very different scope.
Yeah.
It's but you get emails basically as well. You get news and emails, which you synchronize your terminal. And you can set it to auto sync. That's a power drain. So if you want to save it, you just manually sync. And then, there's news stories that are updated sort of over time. I get the impression they just come in as time passes.
So they've presumably written a story that happens in...
Yeah, there's stuff going on, and that stuff relates to real quote unquote places in the game. So you can go and find things. And also you get emails, and some of those emails are related to things you've done, and some of them are sort of characters getting in touch with you, and sometimes more lucrative missions than the ones you might necessarily find in stations, will show up as emails. So and sometimes they're related. So and the reason this works really nicely is flying from place to place is slow and a little bit boring. It's a submarine game in that way, right? Getting from A to B is not necessarily hugely thrilling because it's not really supposed to be. And I think maybe if you were just playing it just for the kind of min-maxing it, you'd probably read an actual book while you were waiting. Even with time on ×4, which is the fastest, it can still take a while. But what you can do is swing around in your in-game seat and load at your email terminal and read through all the news stories and then eventually, maybe your terminal will beep and you'll spin back around and you're being hailed by a police cruiser because your IFF signature was off, and that incurs a 50 credit fine. So you apologize and then you spin back around and you go back to it. But little things that happen so far, like reading about a character in the news stories and then having that same character email because of the system I was in saying, I want someone to transport me somewhere discreetly. No questions asked. Looking for pilots and then accepting that, but then ignoring another one and having an email later saying, I found a pilot, don't worry about it, we're not going to do that. And having sort of like possibilities open up and close off as you kind of explore this little universe. It's really neat. Like still in early access, I think. It did crash on me once, so that's a caveat. And it does a weird, I've got a 1440p monitor. And so and it won't run full screen, which is my only other complaint about it. It tops out at 1080 basically. So if you run it full screen, it just occupies one corner of the screen and the rest is black. Or you run it in a window. But I wanted it to kind of, even though it's lo-fi, I want it full screen, so it's sort of maximally immersive. So those things
kind of crazy looking at screens within a screen within a screen within.
Yeah, so I actually have it in a window, which, but yeah, which isn't optimal. So those are little niggles, but like actually I'm really charmed by it. And despite a sort of early and quite steep, not necessarily a steep learning curve, because I don't think it's super complicated and the tutorial's pretty good. It's just that it is technical and it doesn't offer like big space wows straight away. It doesn't, you know what I mean? That's not what its goal is. But that means that there's like, it doesn't give you that like, and here's the reason you persevere with learning all these systems. It's just, you have to be into the idea of flying a space tugboat where there's nothing to look at.
But that's a quite evocative thing, I think. I mean, hearing you describe it reminds me of a time when I was younger and I was fascinated with flight sims, not because I knew how to play them at all, but the fact that it put you in a cockpit with loads of little things you could flick and kind of tap and change and loads of readouts in a sense that you're actually in a working vehicle that you could manipulate and crash.
Yeah, you can definitely do both of those things.
Yeah.
There's a nice, it doesn't let you completely screw yourself up. Like there's lots of little sort of pedantic things, but it's interesting. There's a line between like asking the player to do too much and too little. Like if you want to leave a station, so you've docked, you have to go to the terminal in the station near the airlock where your ship is docked and click request undocking permission. Cause they won't let you if you've done a crime, for example, that can incur a different issue. And then you get accepted. Then you have to go into your ship and then you have to look back at your own airlock door and close both airlocks.
Good.
And then you have to go to your ship terminal and click undock. And then you have to wait for that to happen. And you just hear it. Like, there's, on paper, the whole game could be 10 times faster if it removed all of the time you spend waiting for
leaving
an imaginary...
a space station wouldn't feel anything, anything like
and
momentous.
But if you turn around and look at your airlock door, above the airlock door is a terminal that you can look at that just measures interior and exterior pressure. And while you're in a station, you can see it and it's the same because they're, atmospheric pressure on both. And you can just watch that number go down if you like.
It's like Elite in, trucks in Elite Dangerous is brilliant for going into space stations. They'll give you a post and you'll look around the space station, you'll see, oh, that's my platform. And it feels like you're in that space universe where, other platforms are occupied by other people doing business, that's such a great illusion.
The weird thing is that kind of like, I think David Braben is very, very keen for Elite to be physically kind of realistic. So that's why Frontier 2, Elite 2, has kind of realistic sort of movement where you do the boosting thing and then you kind of fire off then to slow down at the other end. And you are sort of doing arcs that go across, and it wasn't fun at all. Like you just put the autopilot on and speed time up as much as you could. And then you'd have a fight and it was literally people orbiting each other. Like, and they'd come in, within range of your lasers and you'd have a little shot before they slung shot around you. It wasn't very fun. And I think Elite Dangerous is to extents quite sort of a capitulation. It's as realistic as they could while keeping it a dogfighting game, where this actually sounds much closer to the the sort of the Braben vision.
It doesn't have slingshotting around stars, for example. Like stars don't appear to have like a gravitational impact.
Right.
It is sort of point to point within a system,
which makes, I mean, like it's like the human mind is really not designed to think about we like real fucking space.
And space is kind of two-dimensional in that any given sector is like, as you experience it on your nav map, like a top-down view of space.
But what games do actually, very, very few games try to do three-dimensional space. Like you are mostly, like you might be able to fly up and down a bit, but mostly you're on this flat plane, like, and all the planets are on like this sort of disc.
Homeworld, was you could choose the plane at which you were actually manipulating the units, but it was a truly 3D game in the sense that Under Armour was a thing and Over Armour was a thing. Like if you were related, spun in this direction, shooting upwards at a capital ship that had poor Under Armour, that would be doing extra damage. Like that was a truly 3D game, and it messed people up.
Yeah, it was really hard to cope with.
Yeah, it was very complicated. And there are these amazing models that add like subsystems to all of the ships that could be taken out, and you have to adapt them and rotate them to it gets too insane. Like there's obviously like a niche for that type of thing, but you truly rarely see true 3D movements in many games.
And that's sort of what interests me about this is that like it's sort of, for all of its systemic depth and sort of realism or like impression of realism, it kind of wants to be like an atmospheric experience first and foremost. It's about kind of like feeling like you're in that space and like, getting hails from other ships and replying. There's a lot of writing in it, and that's,
This is kind of like the Animal Crossing thing where like nothing is actually systemically happening, really, but it feels alive because you're noticing tiny little incremental changes or, because there is a routine to things. And, I think routine is a wonderfully kind of underused, kind of powerful thing.
It's little things like you get scanned by system patrol craft and things to see if you're carrying contraband or whatever, or if you're breaching a local law, but so do all the other ships around you. And so you can see those conversations pop up on your comms panel as well. And that's sort of the fact that it's applied universally. It feels like a multiplayer universe. Like it feels like a good mud, maybe, even though it's not. Like, yeah. It's neat. And named after a very good Firefly episode.
What's that called again?
Objects in Space. And so, I'd recommend it. I think it's £15 in early access. And definitely quite tasty. Like, I definitely recommend it. If it sounds like, because it's a very much a mind's eye game in terms of that's where it lives, basically. It's a complex, but in principle, simple set of interactions that create a powerful illusion. But as such, it's one of those games that what's the word I'm looking for? It's in talking about it, you obviously describe your own mind's eye impression of it. So it's easy to get like an impression of it that it doesn't necessarily match up to the reality depending on what you're expecting. So for that reason, I'd say look at the Steam store page and look at some videos if this sounds like the kind of thing that you'd be into. To get a sense of whether that's the thing you want to learn. Do you want to learn the sort of early 90s, late 80s era computer interfaces of the far future? But I have really enjoyed it, and I don't always click with games like this, like where there is that sort of technical or like sort of complexity. But actually I find it quite sort of chilled out and charming, and I like the many noises of space.
You're chilled out, charming.
Thanks, man.
And have many noises.
Let's do some questions.
Shall we?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't have said it otherwise, would I, Alex?
Suppose not. I feel chastened.
You should be. And have and do. Nico writes, as people who write a lot and do a lot of things in the old computator, what are your attitudes / advice / experiences regarding repetitive stress injury, or RSI, if you nasty?
Oh, I'm glad that question's asked. I'm beginning to get a little bit of that coming into my right wrist at the moment, and it's annoying the hell out of me.
My position on it is I've got it. And I don't want it.
Does that mean it doesn't go?
Well, so it's not like I don't have persistent pain in my hands when I'm not using the computer, but the fact that it hurts when I do use the computer is more or less consistent. The the most success I've had, I've bought just every device under the sun to replace a mouse specifically. Typing doesn't really hurt that much. But using mice, has an effect pretty quickly. And so I've used various kinds of trackballs, mice that are on their side, trackballs that are on their side. The problem with a mouse that's on its side, by the way, so you hold your hand as if you're sort of going to shake someone's hand, and that's the grip for the mouse. But otherwise it moves across the table in a normal way. Problem with it is, it's 3 times the height of a normal mouse. And it turns out, when I'm reaching for the mouse, I just kind of sweep my hand across the desk at a certain height. And at that height, it just bats that mouse across the room. It's wireless, so it just flies freely into the wall. And that just happened 8 times the first day I used it. I was like, oh, this just isn't going to work. The most success I had was something, it's just called an air mouse, but it's not a mouse and it doesn't use the air. It's a trackball that's wireless and it's shaped almost like a tiny gun. And the trackball is on your thumb, and the click is the trigger. And that worked really well for me because, it's not bound to a desk in any way. So you're just completely free to move your arms around however you like. And so that just ends up meaning you're using it in lots of different positions and it's not repetitive in the same way that it means your whole sitting posture is not constrained by needing to move the mouse around. So the way that's wireless and I just have that, plugged into my main computer and also to my laptop, just at all times, as well as a normal mouse. So I use a normal mouse, when I need accuracy or, to play FPSs, to be honest, this thing is not good enough. You kind of need to use a mouse. But I'll just switch to this when I'm browsing through Twitter or whatever. And just changing is good as well. Just not using the same thing all the time. And then the other big thing I've done is I learned to play FPSs on a gamepad, which I previously hated and thought was impossible. And now it's just second nature to me and I prefer it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not as good at it as I am with a mouse and keyboard. I don't prefer it and it's not actually more accurate or anything. It's just more comfortable.
Yeah. I'm finding that I don't know whether presumably I was doing it beforehand, but I found that, since it's kicked in, I'm noticing that I'm gripping, even using a controller, I'm gripping it really hard.
Oh, really?
Because then I feel it aching kind of in my hand as well. I don't know. It feels it's like it's chasing into every aspect of my gaming kind of
I'm noticing in the
life.
sense of I always feel like I'm twisting my hands inwards too much when I'm on a keyboard. It's almost like a tension in just you're asked by a normal mouse grip and normal keyboard grip to hold your hands at an odd inward angle.
Yeah.
It's hard to, it's a terrible description on a podcast. But people who understand it will know. And yeah, I'm starting to feel that kind of tension and some pain about that.
Tom looks like he's cranking an oven up to 11.
2 oven knobs.
Opposite directions.
One in each hand. One
Turning
going down.
one to zero.
One off and one on.
Yes.
Tom looks like he's just realised he's put the wrong hob on.
Yeah. And was correct them both at alarming speed.
Defrost mode, but maximum temperature.
I'd echo the playing shooters with pads thing, actually. And I discovered this playing Destiny, which is very much a shooter that's designed for a pad, which helps enormously. And some games just are better designed for pads than others. First-person games, this is. But I would be much more comfortable with playing with a pad for something like Dishonored, to something, and, Destiny, obviously. And anything that goes to a console tends to have a fairly good, pad controls these days.
Yeah.
I'd say. Especially single player stuff.
What I've noticed also is that it really kicks in more when I'm kind of feeling run down. It's kind of like people talk about, your joints aching at certain times more, but it seems to be the weak point at the moment. It just sort of flares up.
Does it hurt in a long cold winter?
We'll see. We'll see as the
coming winters.
Yeah, the nights draw in.
I've never got it.
That's good. It's because you're a healthy man.
Am I?
Well, you do the painting.
That's true. Actually, no, I do get sometimes a little bit RSF from painting, so that doesn't count. But I never got it from computer stuff. Weird. No answers there.
That's a lot.
Only further questions. But that's just holding your hand in one position for a long time. That's not the same as RSI, is it? It is, isn't it? I badly misunderstood the question. Let's move on. Hannah Flynn from Failbetter. You know, Hannah's great. I did a pod with Hannah when I was at Resd. It's really good. People should listen to it. She's great. Right. Hey, it's hashtag Love Indies week. So how about a quick fire round of recommending your latest indie faves? Heart emoji.
I will give another shout out to Dicey Dungeons, because I've been playing that again, and it's been updated significantly since I last did. That's Terry Kavanagh's very simple dungeon crawler where the combat is based around rolling dice, and as he builds it, he's adding more classes, and he's added the witch and the robot lately, and those both work in really different ways. So like normally, like the fighter has, I don't know, like a broadsword, and that just means when you roll some dice, you put the dice in the broadsword and it does whatever the number on the dice is damage. So it does 6 damage if it's a 6. And that's it. And it's just gone. And a thief has a thing that can only do up to 3 damage, but you can reuse it as many times as you like in the same turn. And then the witch that is added, has a totally bizarre thing where, she has a spell book, and there could be up to 6 spells in the book, each one assigned to a number. And to start with, you can't do anything, but you roll a dice, and then if it's like a 4, when you plug it into a slot, it turns into whatever spell you have in slot 4. And that still hasn't cast the spell, you've just set it up to be cast. So each fight, she's kind of designing her own, like, custom spell book for that fight, and then using it. And it's a cool idea, and there's those interesting mechanics there, because you also get to choose what goes into those slots in your spell book. So, like, Magic Missile is my favorite spell, because it just does a shitload of damage. And once you've got it set up, any even dice, you can just put it in and it'll do 5 damage, and that's really good. But for that reason, I don't like to have it on an even slot, because if I've rolled like a bunch of even numbers, I want to use them for the magic missile and use the odd one to like actually create the magic missile spell and then feed it with all the even ones. So there's all kinds of interesting strategy like that, but it makes it really luck dependent. And the robot has a weird thing where they're not actually limited on how many dice they can roll. They just have a total where if the total they've rolled so far gets over that, all their programs crash and they can't use them that turn.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, you can keep rolling them, and if you get loads of ones, you can just keep on rolling them. Yeah, you get to a point where it's like, it would be risky to roll it now, it could crash it. Or if you get exactly the amount, it's a jackpot. You know, like robots have jackpots.
So it is blackjack.
And you then get like a list of 3 special abilities you can do, like do some damage and heal yourself. And,
All right.
Yeah, it's a nice game with Dicey Dungeons. And you can play it on your phone, don't you? Because it's just HTML5.
Yeah.
And it actually runs remarkably well on just in your phone browser.
I haven't tried that since it went commercial, because you know.
Oh, has it gone commercial now? Oh, well,
yeah.
Okay.
You can still buy all the old versions for free, but the latest ones, I think it's like £7. Cool. And it's run through itch.io, and it's still in your browser.
Excellent. I want to give a shout out to Ghost of the Tale, which I've been playing lately, which looks like it's made by a massive team, but actually it's made by 3 people.
Gosh.
But one person did almost, did the main bulk of it, who used to work at, he worked on the Lorax, and he was the animation director of Despicable Me? Yeah, Despicable Me. Anyway, so like he's a sort of Hollywood guy, French animation guy, and so he decided to make a game about a mouse, and it is utterly gorgeous, and it's Dark Souls, but you're a mouse, and it's a lot more exploration-y, where you're going around the same environments, kind of getting all the stuff and doing little quests and things, and it's lovely.
Yeah, it's really cool. I'm still playing Slay the Spire, which is still pretty great, and I've gone back into Dead Cells again, which is due out in a few weeks. Actually.
Yeah. Definitely going to go back to it when it's fully out.
Yeah.
Me too, yeah.
That's a game that every time I go back to it, you think, oh my god, this is good, isn't it?
Then you get annoyed by the progression systems, and then you let it go, and then you pick it back up, and it's like, oh, this is so good.
Slay the Spire was on sale recently, this past weekend when you listened to this, and I didn't buy it because I still haven't played it, because I've got stuff to do. I know, like, from hearing all of you describe it over the course of many months now. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting to the end of
Not
tether,
yet.
I think. But then they'll just probably release a new character at some point, and then that'll be
you won't stop playing Best Buy,
which is the beauty of that game.
I want to give a shout out, partly because obviously I've talked about Objects in Space, which is a very much indie game, but I didn't mention that it's by Flat Earth Games. So, you know, there you go. That's a thumbs up sent across the internet. I also wanted to mention Landfall and Totally Accurate Battlegrounds again.
Oh, have you been playing that?
Yeah, I was playing it the other night, actually. Because it remains wonderful. And they've supported it quite a lot since I talked about it when it came out. Because pointedly, when they put it out, this is the Battle Royale game by the people who made Cluster Truck and Totally Accurate Battle Simulator, which is what this is supposed to be just an April Fool's joke of. And they have to support it because it's extremely popular. Which is, as friends in sales departments like to tell us, a good problem to have. But like, I feel a bit for them because I don't think they really wanted this to happen, because they said at the time, like, we're not supporting this, we're just putting it out there.
Because it was free for quite a few days, like for a week or something.
And then they said it would cost like a nominal amount of money just to pay to keep the servers on, but we're not going to support it. Enjoy it if you want. This is a very physicsy, very, very silly Battle Royale game. And they have supported it, and they have added stuff. And
so
it is
as an
great.
adjunct to this, like, my son, who's 13, is like, he loves Totally Accurate Battle Simulator, and he's desperate for it to actually properly come out, because it's basically just sort of, there is a demo of it, and it's been vaguely added to. I think the last update to it was months and months ago now, and he is checking the site every day and has done for the past, well, it feels like a lifetime. It's probably been about 2 years, and he was appalled by the appearance of the Battle Royale, because he knew that it might well sap their attention, and sounds like it has.
He was right. But they have added, among many other things, regular bicycles. Just regular bicycles, which is the sort of stealth mode of transportation. And one player can sit in the basket on the front with whatever weapon they want. Brilliant. So you can have a little cannon sit in the front of your bicycle, and it makes a lovely little sort of jingly sound as it sort of glides around the landscape. It's so good. It's so stupid. The most exciting thing that's happened to me in the game recently was the other night, where I started and everyone shot themselves out of the big convoy of trucks at the start of the game at the place known as, I think, Crappy Castle. There's a couple of different castles, and they're just named by the developers based on how much effort I think they put into each given one of them. Like, they've made such a wonderful show of how dumb the whole thing is. Like, it does have like a map with like the labeled places, and they've added a few new places since, but they obviously couldn't be bothered to find the font they'd used for labeling the places the first time they made the JPEG of the map. So all of the other place names are just drawn on. Like, you know, when you get like the paint tool and you just try and do the letters yourself, and it always comes out looking the same way, right? Like, kind of like idiot Comic Sans. The rest of them are just scrawled on the map like that. Like, their desperate attempt to convince everyone that they don't want to make this inexplicably extremely popular game. Well, explicably, but undesirable to the developers, apparently. But yeah, I did manage to kill 5 people in a row with a musket, which was the greatest moment of my life. So there. Wonderful. Yeah, our next question comes from Zoe, who writes, if there was a video game of your life, what would your favourite piece of merchandise be?
Mine, I've got an easy answer to this because I have...
a video game of your life?
Well, I have merchandise for Gunpoint. John had a Conway 3D printed for me, which is beautiful, and it's on my mantelpiece, and there's only one of it, and that would be the one I pick.
It's nice. It's coloured as well, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Good Conway.
It's a good Conway.
It's not really an answer to this question, but I can't think of anything more
My life is
terrifying
incredibly bland, and I have nothing to show for it.
Yeah. I can't think of anything more terrifying than being hunted down by a Funko Pop of yourself.
Would it be just like
Every time you
the
turn around,
normal
it's
size
there.
of a Funko
Yeah,
Pop?
exactly,
Like,
yeah.
it's not
thing is,
life
a
size.
Funko Pop would basically remove most of the defining characteristics of my physical
yeah,
form.
Yeah, that's their whole
Yeah.
shtick, isn't it?
I have a theory that
Squat.
everyone in this room, if we were rendered into a Funko Pop, would look identical.
Yeah.
Funko
This
Pops.
is
Yeah,
the, this is
Be
the
the
fucking
same.
issue. It's
Yeah.
like as a yeah, it's like well, I've shaved my beard off in the last week, which means that now, yeah, Tom, maybe we could have differentiated ones. Previously, they would be exactly
Subtly
the same.
different, yeah.
Yeah, it's almost, it's like, well, it's because like the only thing that really differentiates me from a sea of other generic white games men is the fact that I'm quite small. And as soon as you turn me into a Funko Pop, you've removed that one identifying characteristic.
It's just the same.
Well, I mean, previously it was just me and Chris Remo in exactly the same category. Merch though, I don't know.
Identical Funko Pops of ourselves is pretty good merch solution, I think.
It's like
Maybe we
some
should do
sort
Crate
of
and Crowbar versions.
absurdly detailed kind of figurine of us hunched over like a computer.
I feel like maybe just a bottle of Jim Beam would be
Yeah,
a
exactly, yeah.
souvenir merch from my life.
Yeah, yeah. I think Marsh could produce something really grotesque.
Yeah.
I guess we've got the Crate and Crowbar t-shirts.
Yeah, we do actually. Yeah,
got
God,
loads
they
of
haven't
things that Marsh
been. Speaking of legacies of year one,
Yeah.
I mean they're wonderful t-shirts, but like
Yeah.
there was a good idea there in making t-shirts out of good episode titles, and it's just that we haven't done it in half a decade.
Jesus Christ.
And
I met someone wearing one of those t-shirts last year, though.
wow,
Should make more.
yeah,
Is Marsh still collecting the checks for those?
I think so. Yeah,
Good on him.
I don't know who makes good on him. Godspeed wherever you are, Marsh Davies. Our next question comes from Josh. I sounded weird when I said that because I thought I might be mispronouncing. I thought I might be misreading John, but I wasn't. So I corrected Josh into John and then back again in the space of a single O. Josh. Right. Hello, Crate and Crowbar. Your conversation on a previous week about games with the feeling of coming home reminded me of vague spoilers. The end of Bioshock Infinite. As a lover of philosophy and American history, I love some of the twists in that game's plot takes in its finale, along with the world building and mechanics, but I recognise that I am by far in the minority. What games do you stand by in spite of concerned or questioning looks others might direct your way? Thanks for your weekly offering of hot takes, Josh, and that email is entitled Gaming Hills to Die On.
Ooh, I feel like
You've laid your heart bare
that's
already.
I've already died on the hill at the very beginning of this episode, where I was unexpected even to me. I decided to defend David Cage games and talk about them for a long time.
On a PC gaming podcast, no less.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm already dead in this conversation.
But like, I don't know if this is necessarily unexpected because I don't think you necessarily. I don't feel like that's dying on a hill because
It's dying in a
expect.
ditch.
I know, no. I'll
Living
put
on
it
a shitty hill.
I'll put it this way.
I'm alive on a shitty hill. And I hate it.
I trust you to find something to like in really average games.
I'm
That
quite
is-
optimistic actually about
That,
games.
yeah,
that's
you
true.
tend to like things, and that's a positive thing. You see the good in things, like and
Yeah, speaking of which, Tribes Vengeance.
yeah, exactly. Someone mentioned
really like
Tribes before I
Tribes
got to it. Yeah, exactly. Tribes Vengeance is a good game. It's Ken Levine behaving himself and just making a science fiction game about spacemen.
Yep.
Yeah. No, but I was going to, like, you will, like, I don't think you died on that hill. I think you've stood in that field and said, this is fine.
But I could go to another hill. I could go to another 6 out of 10 hill at any
It's all
time.
right. You shout from the side of the hill.
It's fine.
You could
It's problematic, but okay.
You could tribe ski down the hill instead of dying on it and then scoop up.
Because ski up.
I was going to mention Tribes because I can't stop dying on that hill. Because I'm not very good at Tribes. Hey! Tom solved it. I feel this way about Dragon Age a bit, but I feel like my position isn't very robust. And it's not very robust because I have bad opinions, and also because I still haven't played the rest of the Witcher games. But like, there's something about... I'm going to annoy people by being sort of irritated in a sort of vague way with no real grounding here. But hey, it's, been a long podcast, whatever. We're 5 years old today. It's fine.
Oh,
it's my birthday and I'll have bad takes about one today. The issue, so I really love Dragon Age, the entire series, because I think in addition to just being really, really solid fantasy RPGs with a good story and a lot of heart, they also provided, a huge and supported a huge amount of sort of fandom in a positive way. I think that's a term that is attracted and can and legitimately attract some bad connotations, but genuinely like quite a big kind of positive. BioWare generally do this, I think, quite a big positive, diverse, creative fanfic, fan art kind of community around their stuff because of how pluralistic and diverse their games fundamentally are. And for all their strengths as games, things that ended up getting subsequently lauded a lot more, not just The Witcher, but The Witcher sticks in my mind as the kind of pinnacle of that, pull things in a different direction that annoy me. So I feel like I'll always die on the BioWare hill simply by virtue of not just the games themselves, but what they kind of allowed other people to express. Whereas things with arguably maybe like greater specific craft don't charm me as much when that craft comes at the cost of that kind of generosity of creative energy.
It's interesting.
Like, they're not as good as games, probably, but I suspect they will ultimately mean more to people who weren't otherwise being reached out to by things, basically. And that's a hill I'll legitimately die on. Dragon Age 2 is a good game. Damn it. It's a good game.
Mirror's Edge. I agree with every criticism of Mirror's Edge, but I still love it.
Yeah. Oh God, Mass Effect 3's ending was fine. I understand why Tribes died, so I can't really even die on that hill. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, if Mass Effect 3 is generally scowled upon, then I'll die on that hill as well.
Yeah.
I love that game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same.
The next question comes from Austin, who writes, "Hello, creative pod stars. During my recent rolling of a new Pillars of Eternity character, I considered the best approach to writing specificity into my character's background, while avoiding the gradual mutilation of such details as I inevitably counter constraints on my opinions for expressing them. I concluded that this wasn't possible. Instead, I met the game literally on its own terms and defined my character according to dispositions listed in the game's manual. With this approach, my second playthrough has been far more enjoyable. Instead of trying to cover half the canvas with my own ideas, I realized my job was simply to pick the colors with which Obsidian would paint. On my question, what is your approach to creating characters in RPGs? Do you also overthink and overwrite them in an attempt to assuage your guilt of procrastinating your actual writing? Best, Austin." He says, and he adds, "Apologies for the length, but you should have seen the first draft." And that's fine. It's a 3-paragraph email. Perfect length. I feel like I am
eminently qualified.
Being called out. No. So, like, I don't know. Am I the only person here who seriously does this with RPG characters? Like,
Yeah.
Writes the backstory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't bother any of that shit.
I dallied with it a bit. So there are kind of, I used to enjoy RPGs like Baldur's Gate used to let you do this, where you could write your own journal entries and craft your own kind of, you could do it in character if you wanted, but mine became increasingly stupid and full of jokes that no one would ever see, and then I stopped because I realised that I kind of wanted an audience. And yeah, I wasn't entertaining myself enough, really.
Yeah, I mean, I used to, this comes through years of online role-playing and MMOs, and then I had, for years, a document, where I just add bios for every RPG character. There's one doc in my Google Docs to this day, which has a Fallout character, several Skyrim characters, several Mass Effect characters, several Dragon Age characters, a couple of paragraphs for each of backstory, and those evolved over time from like literal sort of life story stuff when I was first doing it to what I thought was a more sophisticated approach, which was like an evocative paragraph, like a fantasy micro story or whatever that would simply give the mood of the character, which is a better approach because a mood is easier to apply to a game than like a literal history, which I get is probably where Austin's coming from. And eventually I just stopped doing it entirely and started going with the game because I think he gets there towards the end of the question, but like, this is interesting writing exercise, but that's kind of all it is. Like, it is not a substitute for like, quote unquote, real, when I say real writing, I don't mean not fan fiction, because I think fan fiction absolutely can be. If you're producing something for someone else to read, fine. If you're writing a bio purely for your own benefit, however, there's a cost-benefit analysis to be done about whether that time is best spent. It's good practice, and it can be fun, and that's worth it. But, like, often the games will fight you, and there might be a better place for that energy, which might well be in fan fiction, or it might be just writing your own fiction, whatever that format takes. But yeah, like, eventually I just sort of stopped. Now, having also started a Pillars of Eternity campaign recently, with that, I just did what I do now, which is like, poke at what I find most interesting in the game's backstory, and not make any decisions about who that character is until you start playing. So, like, I find the God-woken interesting in Pillars of Eternity, who are people who just happen to be born looking like the moon, or death, or they're on fire, or something. And they're neither kind of like ultra-holy nor fully trusted. There's somewhere in the middle. They're just sort of weird. I like this kind of mercantile Italian city-state feel of Old Failure, which is a particular nation that I think gets explored more in the sequel, which I still haven't played. So I sort of came up with the idea of someone who, you know, a sort of lesser scion of a noble house born into a trading family, but leaves because they look like the moon. There you go. That's everything you need for that character to then sort of wander off into the world and do whatever. You
This is like a problem where you need to have played it. Like, you need a knowledge of the world. You need to know the kind of, you know...
It depends on the game. Pillars is good because it gives you lots of mouse-overable things.
Doesn't it? Yeah.
The Elder Scrolls is interesting for this because they always start you as a prisoner, but they never say what you did, why you're arrested, and you get to make up for yourself.
Yeah.
So, I still don't think I ever really... I can't remember. Maybe way back in the Morrowind days I had an idea of, like, what my character did. But I often have an idea for who my character is, like, personality-wise and playstyle-wise, but I almost never have a backstory for them. Like, I don't care what happened to them just before this, but I know how they're gonna handle decisions and morality and things.
Yeah, I think that's far more important. That's kind of what I mean by talk about tone. It's like, you know what tone of the story is going to be. Like, tone is hard to always fully contradict, unless you want to play, like, someone who never speaks or, you know, whatever, but history definitely can be. Okay. Next question comes from Jams, who writes, "Hello. You failed to hold the door open for the wrong little old lady, and you've been cursed to only communicate using barks from a video game. She's not totally evil, however, and has at least let you choose the game. What game do you pick?" Zug Zug. Jams.
I guess they picked Warcraft.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Dishonored, because then at least I could still say, "Shall we gather for whiskey and cigars?"
Yeah. But you don't like cigars.
No, I don't. I'd still get the people in the room with some whiskey, and then from there, it's fine.
And you can say, "Did you hear what happened last night?" And that's about it.
Yeah. Oh, also, I think I'll make captain for what happened last night.
I'd like to break up a forum on the forum post on the Company of Heroes forums, which is titled, "So, what are the Brits talking about?" And this is in relation particularly to the obviously the British expansion for Company of Heroes. Very fine expansion. A folk who say, someone who says that they've had a very boring day off. So inspired by our American friends, they want to explain a lot of the barks that came out of the British troops. And a lot of them are basically just someone going, "This isn't like Sandhurst, not when the enemy wins." Basically like, what is Sandhurst? Well, here goes Bovington's finest, but lots of basically stupid, well, oddly named British.
Here goes
Bovington's finest.
Botherington's finest.
What is the explanation for that one?
Yeah.
Oh,
I just love the idea of, like, what are the English talking about? Is a kind of, I didn't consider
what's a
that.
Bovington?
Yeah.
Is that a type of tank?
Just whiffles in English. Is
it the capital of England?
Bovington, this person explains, was the site of Britain's and probably the world's first tank crew training facility.
Oh,
That's where Tank Museum is now.
Yeah, it is.
I was once driven
been
there at 5 in the morning.
Went there for a World of Tanks event.
Me too.
I think we all did English journalism.
I met James May
oh my God.
and interviewed Dan Snow from Channel 4 at 7 in the morning during a champagne opening for a World War tank exhibition.
Jesus.
I was there to write a book about planes.
You poor bastard.
So yeah, a lot of these are related to place names. Look, this ain't bloody Salisbury Plain. And people are like... Apparently
Such a useful phrase in real life.
this needs explanation. Salisbury Plain, explain, is the site of the Defence Training Estate, the largest military training ground in all the country.
Yeah, it's great. So sometimes, so you drive along there, really straight roads, you go really fast. You go along very, very fast along the road, and it has all these kind of tank signs,
crossings, yeah.
tank crossing
Amazingly,
signs. So good.
I'm from Salisbury.
That's
so.
your land.
Yeah, it is my land. Yeah.
These get good. So the next one is like all shipshape and Bristol fashion.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is, for
why is anyone asking about
exactly.
that?
It just means it's right.
Yeah. The boat's good, innit?
The boat's fine. The boat's fine. It's
And it's
Bristol
like
fashion.
a city.
Yeah, it's a bit like Bristol.
Scruffy.
But lovely.
Yeah.
So I love that this next one needs explanation, and the line is, "That's for my nan and her house."
Hold on, what? That's mine.
That's for my nan and her house.
So this person's nan got blown up in the Blitz. Is that the implication?
And he's mad about his nan, but he's also doubly mad about the house. Come on.
It's a really nice place he's hoping to inherit.
But I love that this is like...
There was always money in the nana stand.
I just love that this needs to be explained, and the explanation,
See where it's going.
Nan, in quote marks, means grandmother. This statement is referring to the strategic bombing of the UK by the Luftwaffe.
Primarily this man's nan.
V-series missiles during the Second World War. Oh, it's too good. The barks are good. They're mostly good. I just enjoy that they've for example,
Exhaustively.
time to earn the king's shilling is apparently confused enough people for someone to write a forum post about why. That's not a thing that people probably would have said very often anyway. Really.
No. I can imagine other people not knowing what a shilling is outside of the UK.
Or the King's one.
Swearing expressions. Royal Engineers run like buggery. That needs explaining.
Now, buggery means...
Buggery is
and then, hang on.
Buggery is an old legal term meaning sodomy. It's commonly blah, 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 blah.
So they went that far, but it doesn't, there's no meaning
It just
there.
means a lot.
Yeah.
It's like most
It's just putting a swear word in.
Any given swear word can be used to mean lots.
In fairness, if it just said buggery means a lot, it could have led the American into some awkward situations in the future.
Yeah, that's
How
true.
many chips do you want? I want a buggery of these chips.
That makes sense, though. I would completely understood what you meant.
You give a funny look, but you think that's fine.
If someone says how many chips, do you know, I don't know what scenario someone asks how many chips you want, but like how many chips you want, like buggery. That makes
could
complete
mean-
sense. That makes complete sense.
But no, it could mean I don't want any chips. Like buggery,
buggery,
I want chips.
No, it depends how you say it. It's on intonation at that point. Like buggery. Lots of chips. Like buggery.
In a noisy pub.
Looks
How
like
are
a
you
pretty
gonna-
similar.
I'm worried.
Yeah.
The buggery
But
chip
like,
system
you
cannot
can,
stand.
You can replace buggery with any other swear word in that scenario, and it makes complete sense.
Oh, these are very good. I don't remember some of them being said in this game, I have to be said, but apparently someone in this game might have said, enemy rocket, that's not cricket.
That's really bad.
That is terrible writing.
A stereotypical British English expression, literally translated as that's against the rules of cricket.
Very true.
Cricket, they go on to say, is a popular sport that likes to associate itself with gentlemanly conduct. Fair play.
And a V2 is well out.
Oi, break it up, you wankers.
Good.
I'm endlessly amused by the fact that, like, I think there's a whole generation of, like, American video game writers who've underestimated what level of swear word wanker is.
Yeah. 100%,
Like, it's just a funny thing British say.
Yeah.
Hey, you wanker.
All right, wanker. And that's fair, but you have to kind of be British for that to work.
Nan
Yeah.
wouldn't say that.
It's also,
After a house gets blown up.
that totally plays into, this quote apparently, under fire from half track, silly sod.
Who's the silly sod? It's the half track that's in
You
the song.
silly bastard. Pick whether you're a car or a tank, you wanker.
Only half a track.
And the explanation is sod is short for sodomite.
Oh God!
In a
I
modern
forgot about
context,
this
Not
part.
really,
It's
though.
just
It's
like-
like the word bugger. It's not really.
Yeah.
it's like the lowest form of swearing. Because call someone a sod is just like not literally.
Sod's law, or as we also know, it's sodomite's law.
I enjoyed that. For
It appears that most of the British
legendary.
swear words involve bottoms, and that's probably
there's a whole jokes section where they explain the jokes, and it's not. It's not going.
So-
I've done enough.
Miraculously, my pick for box, I would have to speak through also involves company heroes, but in a very different way. So recently, for something I'm writing, I've been playing the wonderful Sonic and All Stars Racing Transformed, and I would definitely pick that game.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to go too deep on it because it's so good. But one of the reasons it's so good is whoever at Sega decided to just open up that cross-pollination Sega floodgate as wide, to wholly embrace the fact that Sega as a brand makes no sense. To have Sonic and the guy from Shenmue and the people from the monkeys from Super Monkey Ball, I think, you know.
the people.
Yeah.
The people from Super
the
Monkey Ball.
detailed characters from Super Monkey Ball. And the rest of the Sonic characters alongside a Roman centurion from Total War.
That one.
And the manager from Football
The football manager and General Winter, a Soviet tank commander from Company of Heroes 2 is the best fucking thing. And the Soviet tank commander, like all of the completely out of place ones, and also the actual human racing driver Danica Patrick, who's in this game as well as herself.
licensing.
It's so good. But the tank commander is the best because he's like all of because you could get maybe some mileage in life out of speaking through Sonic Sparks and things, but the real mileage is in the others, like Willamus, the Roman centurion in a Roman centurion themed car, who basically just screams, "I have shamed Rome!" when he gets overlapped by Tails.
Outstanding.
It's so good.
Absolutely outstanding.
But like, and the Russian commissar who's like T-70 tank ramps off the aircraft carrier from Afterburner, transforms into a Soviet sub in midair and then splashes into the ocean to cries of, "The people of the Soviet Union will not forget this." But the best, and the best of them is the football manager.
Yeah, well, do they have him say anything?
Yeah, he says loads. He says, like, if you
He shot himself in the foot there.
he does. It is like, "Get in," and then like, "Well, it's a beautiful game." It's so good. And all of them have this mode where you can get a power-up that puts you into all-star mode. And so if you're Sonic, that's like, it mostly just makes the car bigger and glow. If you're one of the Monkey Ball characters, you roll around in the Monkey Ball, etc. It makes you, it's sort of Supersonic mode, except it's not actual Supersonic, that's a different character. But when you are football manager and you go into like, because also if you are not football manager, everyone else gets an announcement that says like, "Football manager has gone all-star," and you can just hear fucking football whistles going, boop, 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 boop. This glowing magic football manager speeds through the pack going, "Get in! Wow! Balls!" It's brilliant. And then when you're in the lead, if you're sufficiently in the lead, the crowd starts chanting your name. And obviously when they started developing the game, they get this going like, "Sonic! Sonic! Sonic!" But the best is the crowd going, "Football manager! Football manager!" As you fly the football manager car deftly around the snapping jaws of the Panzerdragoon Saga Dragon. It might be the best video game ever made.
It's a good video game. I like it a lot.
And I don't know what my life would be if I could only communicate through those barks. Apart from the fact that it'd be better.
It'd be rich.
It'd be better.
And very
The football, the World Cup has concluded as we record this.
Yeah.
And I'd like to, just to get this into the show notes, share a Richard Morris clip, which is simply a piss take of football commentary and football in general. You know, I love football, in which a man scores a goal and Chris Morris, playing the commentator, goes, "Twat! That's liquid football!"
That's Alan Partridge, isn't it?
Is that Alan Partridge?
It is Alan Partridge.
He did
maybe
that
so.
kind of thing.
It might have been on Brass Eye or something when
Yeah.
he was like a sub character on that. But I just to get that clip in there to the show notes. I think it's excellent.
I love that. I love that quote so much that I've been shouting "twat, that's liquid data" for the better part of the last 5 years.
It's always applicable.
It's never not good. It might be Chris Morris. I always thought that was Alan Partridge.
I remember,
Or Steve Coogan, at least. But
I remember an Alan Partridge bit when he's on The Day Today. Is that the right name? Where he's doing like the normal kind of commentator blabber as the guy comes up to score, and then when he scores, it's just, "Holy shit! You must have a foot like a traction engine."
That probably is like
I think it's Steve Coogan. Yeah, I think it's Steve Coogan on The Day Today.
I think I must have seen it retweeted by Chris Morris bits, who just basically retweets like clips of all Chris Morris programs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Twat.
That's
so
liquid
good.
football.
Yeah. Actually, that's the thing. Like, the Football Manager in Sonic and All Stars Racing Transformed, the greatest sentence thing is language, adds this like thickly Partridgean layer to that game.
Yeah.
And it's not just because of that.
Partridgean.
Like,
Delicious.
I mean
Partridgean
that-
sludge, if you will.
I mean that very seriously. That I feel
Unctuous, horrible thing. Claw through it.
I feel like it's under. I mean, actually, well, I suppose this is kind of exactly what Behold the Kickmen was going for.
Yeah.
The same thing. It's basically the same joke.
But you've got to make that joke with a love of football for it to really sing,
Yeah,
I think.
you do.
Yeah,
Like, it is just the fact that the Football Manager is just a completely anonymous man, white man, in a suit with a helmet on and shades, so you can't tell who it is, driving a car whose hubcaps are footballs, and that's it. It's just a car. Like, that's what makes it. It's like if they'd over-themed it, or tried to create a mascot for football, it wouldn't have worked. It's the fact that he's surrounded by these cartoon, colourful characters, and it's just a human man. It's quite an expensive car, because footballers make a lot of money. That's the only kind of, like, maybe...
Bit of satire.
Yeah, exactly.
But it also plays on the fact that Football Manager, you know, all their covers are of a man in a suit whose head is cut off, like it's above the, you know, the cut off of the
It's
box
meant
art.
to be you, sort of thing.
Yeah, so
It'd be kind of great if they just stopped there, just there is no head. And
it's always off shot. Yeah,
I honestly think it should have just been like Miles Jacobson or somebody like.
yeah. You can always just see Miles Jacobson's chin and nothing else above that, just always obscured. Good games.
Good games. That
5 years
is
of podcast.
yeah, that is all of the 5 years of podcast we've got time for. If you'd like to send us a question for a future 5 years of podcast, you can do so by emailing us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can tweet us at crateandcrowbar. You can find us on YouTube at /crateandcrowbar. You can find our Patreon, which allows us to do the podcast and all of its spin-offs at patreon.com /crateandcrowbar. You can also find us individually on some form of social media. I'm on Twitter at @CThurston, that's CTHURSTEN. Tom Francis.
I am at Pentadact, PENTADACT.
I am at Rotational on Twitter, ROTATIONAL.
Hey! Played for and got. Tom Senior.
Tom Senior, PCT Ludo.
Ludo.
Maybe I should call myself Ludo from
Ludo.
LUDO.
Good. Bye. Thanks for
For 5 years.
Yeah, 5 years.